Chapter 3:18. The more Du Xingchuan thought about it, the more disheartened he was. With the cover of the river, the 5 Zing battleships were useless. Without the help of such a powerful weapon, how could they be the opponent of the target with only the strength of practitioners on their side? Don't forget that as early as a few days ago, thousands of practitioners were defeated by the target, and their blood flowed like a river. From the beginning to the end, no one could stop the target at all. In addition, in recent days, they had consumed a lot of materials, which made many practitioners lose their fighting spirit. How could they fight against the target? Du Xingchuan doubted that even Su Qianjing, the tactical master of the young generation, would not be able to reverse the situation at this moment. Boss, there is news from the front that the stronghold 37 miles away from here was destroyed by the target in a surprise attack. All 19 of our companions were killed. From a distance, there was a sudden cry, which was no less than a bad news, which made the faces of Du Xingchuan, Young Mu, and all the practitioners around them suddenly changed. How long had it been? The target started to act again. Damn it, why didn't you seize the opportunity to kill him with Zing battleship? Nonsense, didn't you hear that the target is a surprise attack? Who knows where he will appear? What kind of surprise attack will he use? Although Zing battleship is powerful, it is impossible to lock the target in an instant, right? What should we do? Many people couldn't help cursing, as if they were venting their inner fear and irritation, which made the atmosphere on the scene chaotic and noisy. At this moment, Du Xingchuan finally judged that, as he had speculated, the target intended to use the river as a cover to break their control forces one by one. Thinking of this, Du Xingchuan felt cold all over and let out a hysterical roar. Shut up. Go and inform all the forces distributed along the way to gather here quickly. At the moment, many practitioners started to take action. Boss, if we do this, the target can easily get rid of our pursuit as long as he sneaks from the bottom of the river. Young Mu reminded him in a deep voice. Do you really want to do this? Du Xingchuan looked gloomy and said bitterly, let Zing battleship and Wind Shadow Hawk monitor the trace of the target first. We have lost too many troops here. We can't let this situation continue to deteriorate. Young Mu sighed and said no more. Until late at night, many of the forces that had been placed along the river converged with Du Xingchuan and the others. However, when he counted the number of people, Du Xingchuan felt as if the sky had collapsed. He felt dizzy and couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. 419. From Mist City to now, including some companions on Zing battleship, there were only more than 400 people left on their side. 3,000 elite forces, 6 Zing battleships, a large number of materials and equipment, but now, actually reduced to such a situation. Du Xingchuan's voice was bitter and depressed, revealing indescribable resentment and grief. And the one who caused all this was just a teenager. Who would dare to believe it? Who would dare to imagine it? Young Mu also felt sad and speechless. Looking at the other practitioners nearby, they were all depressed and lost. They were completely frightened. In their hearts, Lin Sun had become an invincible demon, which made them feel unprecedented powerlessness and fear. At this time, not to mention fighting with Lin Sun, they would be scared to run away when Lin Sun appeared. This situation was seen by Du Xingchuan, which made his chest so stuffy that he couldn't breathe. What should he do? In fact, Du Xingchuan already had the answer in his heart, but when he thought of Qi Tsangmei's order, he hesitated. Should he retreat or not? In the middle of the night, Lin Sun rushed out of the river silently, like a shadow, and rushed to the distance. Before long, an open area appeared, and a Zing battleship with a length of 300 meters was quietly moored there. Looking from a distance, it was like a giant beast sleeping on the earth. The opportunity is right in front of me. In the dark night, Lin Sun took a deep breath. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time, and finally the Zing battleship was moored. This was not a whim. Lin Sun was very clear that the Zing battleship needed to be moored to replace the exhausted high-level spiritual crystals in the spiritual furnace after flying for 8 hours at most. Otherwise, if it couldn't be done in time, the battleship would lose power and fall from the sky like a bird without wings. Whoosh! Lin Sun soon came to the tail of the Zing battleship, turned over, and jumped to the deck of the battleship. In the night, he flashed forward like a ghost. Lin Sun was so familiar with the Zing battleship. It was originally designed by him. How could he be unfamiliar with it? Suddenly, a figure came out from one side corner. But before he found Lin Sun, his neck was twisted by a big hand, and his body fell silently and softly. After doing all this, Lin Sun moved forward for more than 30 meters and stopped in front of deck. There was a hatch leading to the operation room. He took out the flowing lightsaber and stabbed it dozens of times around the hatch. A dense and crisp sound rang out. Finally, with a snap, the hatch automatically popped up and opened. This was a complicated mechanism. If one used brute force, even a Sea of Souls realm warrior would have a hard time blasting open this door. But if he mastered the trick of the mechanism, it would be easy to open it without any effort. Whoosh! With a slight flash, Lin Sun's figure got into the cabin, and the open cabin door was closed again. It was dark in the operation room, and there was no practitioner guarding it. Lin Sun checked and found that the spiritual formation disc that controlled the Zing battleship could be started at any time. He couldn't help but smile. These practitioners were really stupid. In his original design, when the Zing battleship was moored, the first thing to do was to lock the spiritual formation disc with a unique secret method. In this way, even if an enemy sneaked into the operation room, he couldn't drive the Zing battleship at all, and it could prevent the Zing battleship from being used privately. But obviously, the practitioners who drove the Zing battleship this time ignored this detail. Or they probably didn't think that there was someone in the world who could easily open the mechanism on the hatch and finally sneak into the operation room. Without thinking more, Lin Sun quietly clenched the flowing lightsaber in his hand. His eyes became indifferent and cold, and he pushed open the door on one side of the operation room. This door led to the hinterland of the cabin. If Lin Sun guessed right, a group of practitioners who drove the Zing battleship were in it. 15 minutes later, Lin Sun returned to the operation room unscathed. But in every area of the hinterland of the cabin, there were corpses lying, and the air was full of blood. Finally, it's my turn to take the initiative to attack. Lin Sun sat in front of the spiritual formation disc, with a touch of coldness in his deep black eyes. This was the Zing battleship he designed, but it was used by the enemy to deal with him, and he almost died. Now, it was time for him, the designer, to control his work and carry out a counterattack. Young Mu, let's withdraw. After struggling in his heart for a long time, Du Xingchuan squeezed this sentence out of his teeth one by one. It was like removing a stone in his heart. When he said this, Du Xingchuan felt relaxed all over. But there was also an inexplicable sense of loss. Boss, we still have 5 Zing battleships here. Young Mu was shocked. He didn't expect that Du Xingchuan would choose to retreat at this moment. What was the difference between this and admitting defeat? Admitting defeat also meant that the operation was completely declared a failure. If Qi Sangmei knew this, the first person she would kill was Du Xingchuan. No, these days, the Zing battleship has consumed a lot of high-level spiritual crystals. It won't be long before we fall into a situation where we can't cook without rice. Even if the target appears at that time, what's the use? Du Xingchuan said in a deep voice. The most important thing is that since the target knows the existence of the Zing battleship, how can he show up rashly? Boss, Young Mu wanted to say something more, but he was interrupted by Du Xingchuan. Let's do it. We have already lost the battle. If we continue to struggle, the result will only get worse and worse. His voice was resolute. Young Mu sighed dejectedly. Even if he was unwilling, he could only agree. Boom, however, just when Du Xingchuan and Young Mu were going to issue an order to retreat, there was a sudden, thunder-like roar in the void far away. Everyone was alarmed. They looked up and saw a Zing battleship rising into the air. It was so dazzling like a scorching sun in the night. Did the target appear? Du Xingchuan, Young Mu, and others were all stunned. Just for a moment, another Zing battleship rose into the air. Boss, it seems that the target has been found. It's not wise to retreat at this time. Young Mu asked. Then, wait a little longer. Du Xingchuan's look changed for a while, and he finally sighed softly. He knew that this kind of waiting was doomed to be fruitless. What was the use of dispatching Zing battleship? As long as the target escaped into the river, all the actions would be in vain. Huh, boss, look at that Zing battleship. It has launched the spiritual cannon. Obviously, it has locked the target. Young Mu pointed to the distance and said excitedly. Du Xingchuan was stunned. He couldn't believe that it was true. How could the target be so stupid that he was exposed to Zing battleship at this moment? The practitioners nearby had cheered up. The fear, panic, frustration, and helplessness accumulated in their hearts for many days completely broke out at this moment. They all wished that Zing battleship could kill the target at one stroke. Boom! Under the scorching gaze of the crowd, Zing battleship launched an attack. A beam of light as bright as the scorching sun swept through the sky, tearing the curtain of the night. The momentum could be described as earth-shattering. But when they saw that the direction of the light beam was actually another Zing battleship in the void, all the people present were stunned. Their complacent, expectant, scorching, and excited expressions froze at the same time. They were dumbfounded. Chapter 319. The other Zing battleship obviously didn't expect that such a thing would happen. Its reaction was obviously slow. Boom! With an earth-shattering noise, the Zing battleship was blasted with a hole. In the billowing smoke, the Zing battleship fell to the ground. The fire rushed to the sky and shone on the faces of Du Xingchuan, Young Mu, and other practitioners. It could be clearly seen that their eyes were dilated and they couldn't believe it. Our own people beat our own people. What the hell is going on? Boom! The Zing battleship fell to the ground and made an explosion. Black smoke was billowing in the sky. There is no doubt that all the practitioners on the Zing battleship must have been killed. This explosion also woke Du Xingchuan and others who were in a daze from shock. Their faces suddenly changed, and they exclaimed again and again in a mess. How could this happen? What the hell is going on? Damn it! That's the Zing battleship. Destroying one is equivalent to losing hundreds of thousands of gold coins. At this moment, even Du Xingchuan was a little confused and couldn't figure out the situation. But immediately, he found that another Zing battleship rushed over in the far distance. It was obviously aware of the violent movement just now. Almost at the same time, the first Zing battleship started the spiritual cannon again. Dense spiritual tattoo patterns emerged in the bright light, which looked so dazzling. No! Du Xingchuan's heart thumped. Boom! Another cannon was fired. The Zing battleship, flying from a distance, was hit hard and finally fell down before it could figure out the situation. Boss, something is wrong. Young Mu roared. No need to guess. That Zing battleship must have been hijacked by the target. Du Xingchuan's face was cloudy. If he still couldn't see the source of the abnormality at this time, he would be really stupid. What? Hijacked by the target? Fuck, that's the Zing battleship. Even the strong in Sea Spirit realm can't break the hatch. How could it be hijacked by the target? Besides, it needs a unique secret method to control the Zing battleship. How could the target master the way to control the Zing battleship? Cries of alarm sounded from all directions. They were struck dumb by this string of changes, feeling as if the world had become unreal, absurd, and inconceivable. It was really incredible. For them, Zing battleship was their most reliable weapon at present. But now, two of them had been forcefully destroyed, and the other was controlled by the target. Who could accept this? Boss, what do we do now? Young Mu was extremely anxious. However, Du Xingchuan's figure was swaying, and he looked like he was about to be unable to hold on any longer. His lips were trembling as he said, "It's over. Everything is over. If I had known, I would have retreated in advance. And this wouldn't have happened. Boss, what's wrong?" Young Mu shouted. His heart was bleeding. Du Xingchuan spat out a mouthful of blood. His face suddenly became extremely pale, and his eyes became dim. "Retreat. Retreat quickly. If we don't leave now, even we will be doomed." Du Xingchuan's voice was weak and hoarse, as if he'd lost all his strength, and it was obvious how great the blow he'd suffered this time was. "Retreat! Hurry up and retreat!" Young Mu roared around. The fighting spirit of the group of cultivators had collapsed since long ago, and they were terrified to the point of being out of their wits. When they heard this, they instantly fled in all directions in panic, and they were simply like stray dogs. At the same time, Young Mu also picked up Du Xingchuan's body and fled to the distant night like a madman. He knew that this action was completely over, and there was no room for turning back at all. Undoubtedly, the top priority was to save his life first. As for other things, they were no longer important. In the sky, Lin Sun drove the Ziying battleship like a dexterous bird in the void, drawing thrilling and mysterious trajectories and constantly patrolling. The spiritual formation plate was not difficult at all in his hand. It was perfectly manipulated by him, as if he was his own arm. What could he do? The Ziying battleship was designed by him. It could be said that the layout of every inch of this treasure, the use of every spiritual tattoo, and the power of the spiritual furnace were all determined by Lin Sun. This made him skillful in manipulating the Ziying battleship, which could make other practitioners stunned. The Ziying battleship made a roaring roar. Under the control of Lin Sun, it swept forward at a high speed in the void. Before long, a new target was locked in his vision. In the distant night, two Ziying battleships were moving side by side, sweeping towards Lin Sun aggressively. To Lin Sun's surprise, the other side had obviously noticed that something was wrong. As soon as they saw the Ziying battleship, they launched an attack. Rumble, for a time, the void was full of crisscrossing artillery fire, tearing the night and making the world as bright as day. Lin Sun looked calm and quickly maneuvered the battleship to dodge the artillery fire. Although it was the first time for him to drive a battleship to fight with an opponent, he was not afraid. His confidence came from the perfect understanding and control of the Ziying battleship. Whoosh! The Ziying battleship controlled by Lin Sun was like a butterfly dancing in the void. Its movement was ethereal and smooth. It avoided the intensive attacks one after another and left a dangerous track in the void. It felt as if the Ziying battleship was alive. All the practitioners on the two Ziying battleships were shocked, and their eyes widened. How could this be possible? Yes, it was the first time for them to see that someone could operate the Ziying battleship so perfectly. Compared to them, their control methods were simply crude and unbearable. Hurry up. Fire with all your strength. Damn it. Damn it. Who is controlling the Ziying battleship? All kinds of roars filled the two Ziying battleships. They were all shocked by Lin Sun's skillful and extraordinary manipulation. Rumble, the confrontation in the air, was between two warships. The scene was extremely spectacular. Cannon lights flew everywhere, densely packed like shooting stars, tearing through the void and illuminating the mountains and rivers. On the ground, many rocks were broken and the earth collapsed. The scene was devastated by the bombardment. It was no different from the battle between the strong men of Sea Spirit Realm. But strangely, Lin Sun didn't launch another attack from beginning to end. He kept maneuvering the battleship to dodge and seemed to be waiting for an opportunity. The practitioners on the two Ziying battleships were in a complete panic. It seemed that they were facing a venomous snake, which was swimming and dodging, waiting to give them the most fatal blow. No matter how the two battleships cooperated and what tactics they adopted, they didn't cause any harm to each other from beginning to end. On the contrary, with the continuous attacks, their battleships consumed a lot of high-level spiritual crystals. Before long, a practitioner on one of the Ziying battleships screamed, "Oh, there's only one high-level spiritual crystal left. We must land immediately. Otherwise, the battleship will lose power and fall from the sky." His words made other practitioners on the battleship stiff, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. But no matter what, their lives mattered. Under the stimulation of death, those practitioners began to flee to the distance, waiting for an opportunity to land. However, at this time, the Ziying battleship driven by Lin Sun seemed to have been waiting for this moment. Without any hesitation, it launched the most violent attack. Boom! The pouring artillery fire was like a long whip, lashing in the dark void and covering the fleeing Zing battleship in the distance. In a moment, the Zing battleship had been whipped and exploded and finally fell from the void. At the same time, the other enemy Zing battleship also panicked. It suddenly turned off the fire, crushed the clouds, and fled in another direction. It was terrible. If they didn't escape at this time, they would be no match for the target in a one-on-one situation. Only by escaping could they find a chance of survival. However, they completely underestimated Lin Sun's ability. At the same time, when the Zing battleship was destroyed, he had already maneuvered the battleship to chase them with an exaggerated and thrilling track in the void. In the end, the last enemy Zing battleship was completely destroyed under the long-accumulated artillery attack of Lin Sun. Looking at the rising fire and billowing black smoke, Lin Sun suddenly thought of the little girl Loloa's simple and kind mother, and the spiritual shuttle destroyed by the artillery fire of the Zing battleship. I have avenged all of you. Please rest in peace, Lin Sun murmured in his heart, his face calm like an ancient well. He might have avenged others, but his revenge journey had just begun. Was it over after repelling the enemy? Was it over if he could enter the Forbidden City smoothly? No. This encirclement and suppression operation against him was doomed not to end so easily from the beginning. The Qi family behind the enemy and the huge force that might exist behind the Qi family were the real murderers behind the scenes. Whether it was for revenge or to find out the truth that they wanted to stop him from going to the Forbidden City, Lin Sun was doomed not to let go of this hatred easily. Drop, drop, there was a sharp sound in the cabin, which shocked Lin Sun. He sighed in his heart and carefully drove the battleship to land on the ground. Bang! Opening the cabin door, Lin Sun's figure flashed into the distant night. The Zing battleship was indeed a great treasure. Its value was immeasurable. Unfortunately, the high-level spiritual crystals in the battleship were on the verge of exhaustion and could not be fully used. Lin Sun could only give it up. However, before leaving, he had plundered all the valuable things in the battleship and destroyed the core spiritual furnace of the battleship. Even if it was found by the enemy, it would never be repaired without a lot of time and energy. Shriek, running in the dark, Lin Sun suddenly stopped and looked up into the sky. He saw a wind shadow hawk flying in the sky. With a smile on his lips, Lin Sun waved his hand to the wind shadow hawk silently. Then he withdrew his gaze and walked forward again. Chapter 320. In the Forbidden City, in the old mansion. Bang, bang, bang. In the closed room, there was a sound of items being smashed and angry curses sounded from time to time. The two waiters guarding outside the door were trembling with fear. After the latest news from the front line just came, the room seemed to be in a great earthquake, which was shocking. There were 3,000 elite practitioners, but only a few hundred survived in the end. What a bunch of rubbish. Du Xingchuan should be killed. Who can tell me why the boy hijacked a Zing battleship, and he destroyed all the battleships on our side? 6 brand new Zing battleships, each of which is worth 200,000 gold coins, are rare treasures that can't be bought with money. But now, except for 2 which are seriously damaged, the others are all destroyed. Who can afford the price? Damn it. In the room, those young men who acted as deputies roared angrily. They were deeply stimulated by the news just now, completely disregarding their manners. On the ground, there were broken teacups, tables and chairs, and pieces of items. The bright candlelight flickered, and the light shone on everyone's livid and gloomy face, making them look particularly ferocious. A well-prepared action spanned between Mist City and the Forbidden City. They had prepared a strong force and materials, but in the end, they were defeated. He had been defeated by a teenager. They were defeated in a mess. Who could accept this? Rubbish. A bunch of rubbish. When Du Xingchuan comes back, I will kill him first. The curses continued, as if they were venting their grievances, doubts, and resentment. Only Qi Sangmei didn't say a word from beginning to end. She sat there alone, with an indifferent expression on her beautiful and fierce face. No emotion could be seen from her face. She just sat there like a sculpture. Despite the curses around her, she didn't respond at all. After a long time, those curses gradually subsided. Those young men were also tired of cursing. They all sat down with gloomy faces. Stop cursing? Chi Tsang-mei, who had been silent, finally opened her mouth. She raised her head and glanced at the people around without hiding the disdain in her eyes. Those deputies were all uncomfortable and didn't dare to make eye contact with Chi Tsang-mei. No matter how useless the forces we sent out were, they still fought with their lives on the line. Their deaths are enough to prove that they died a worthy death. As for you, Chi Tsang-mei said coldly, maybe he is the real waste. Trash. The hearts of those assistants roiled when they were humiliated like this, yet none of them dared to refute. Look, you don't even dare to refute. What's the use of keeping you? Chi Tsang-mei's voice became calmer and calmer, but her words became more and more sarcastic. It's my fault. Why did I make a mistake and keep you around as my assistants? Perhaps this also shows that I'm just a fool with eyes, but no eyes? The more she spoke like this, the more uneasy those assistants felt. They felt as if there was a blade on their backs, as if they were sitting on a bed of needles, and their expressions became stiff and embarrassed to the extreme. Princess May, although this action failed, the target has not yet entered the Forbidden City, which means that we still have a chance. Finally, someone couldn't endure it any longer. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, I'm willing to head to the front lines myself to capture and kill this kid. Yes, I'm willing to. Others also spoke one after another as if to show their loyalty. Chi Tsang-mei was indifferent. She looked at those people with a trace of pity in her eyes. Are you sure? Of course. Those assistants didn't hesitate to speak. Chi Tsang-mei thought of something and sneered. Then I have to ask you, who can guarantee that they can kill the target with their own strength? I'm serious, so you'd better not answer in a hurry. Those assistants looked stagnant, and they didn't say a word at once. These days, they had been paying attention to the actions of the front lines. How could they not understand that the target they were going to deal with this time was an abnormal young evildoer? Even 6 Zing battleships and 3,000 elite practitioners were defeated by him. If they went there, how could they have a chance to win? The reason why they clamored to go to the front lines before was nothing more than being humiliated by Chi Tsang-mei, so they said it out of anger. When they really fought with the target, they would run away faster than rabbits. Seeing this, Chi Tsang-mei's expression became indifferent and cold. She slowly got up and said, There's no celebration party. Take care of yourselves. After that, she turned around and pushed the door away. There seemed to be no threat in her words, but those assistants' faces suddenly changed and they were out of their wits. Because they all knew that Chi Tsang-mei was really angry. The consequences were really serious. In the night, Chi Tsang-mei was sitting in a chariot, looking at a bead floating in front of her. She was in a trance. In the bead, there was a light curtain. The picture was very simple. It was a scene of a young man smiling and waving to the air in the dark. Chi Tsang-mei looked at it quietly, as if she was looking at the young man. She knew that this handsome young man was Lin Sun for a long time. But when she looked at Lin Sun again at this time, she suddenly found that this young man was so strange, as if she had never really understood and been familiar with him. At this time, he seemed to be smiling. The smile could even be described as brilliant. But for Chi Tsang-mei, the smile was so dazzling. Especially when she saw the deep black eyes of the young man. Chi Tsang-mei's heart trembled. His eyes were too calm, like a pool of stagnant water, without a trace of waves and emotions. But it made Chi Tsang-mei feel a trace of inexplicable chill in her heart. Crack! She raised her hand and crushed the bead. Her face had become indifferent. Even if you come to the Forbidden City, I will not give up. Father, the action failed. As soon as she returned to the clan, Chi Tsang-mei went straight to the study of her father, Chi Lingxiao. Looking at her father who was sitting at the desk and reading by the candle, Chi Tsang-mei seemed to fade her strong color, and her breath became soft and obedient. Well, tell me specifically, Chi Lingxiao said casually. He was a thin man in a Confucian robe, gentle and elegant, full of scholarly spirit. However, even if he was sitting there, his back was still straight like a spear. His shoulders were not broad, but they were like mountains that could support the sky. There was a kind of leisurely bearing of the whole person. Chi Tsung-mei deliberated for a moment, and then told all the details of the action. From the beginning to the end, Qi Lingxiao still sat at the desk, quietly reading an ancient book in his hand. His expression never changed. Until Qi Tsung-mei finished, Qi Lingxiao nodded and said, "Yes, we have done what should be done. Whether it is success or failure, it has nothing to do with us." Qi Tsung-mei was stunned. She couldn't believe her ears. What did it mean, whether it is success or failure? It has nothing to do with us. This operation had failed. How could it have nothing to do with the loss of so much strength? "Father, what the hell is going on?" Qi Tsung-mei couldn't help asking. Qi Lingxiao put away the ancient book in his hand and said, "From the moment when we agreed not to send any force above Gang's spirit realm to participate in the action, the result has been doomed. If we win, the curtain will fall with the death of Lin Sun. If we lose, Lin Sun will have the qualification to enter the Forbidden City." Speaking of this, Qi Lingxiao smiled. "You just need to think about the intention behind this agreement. Behind it, some people want Lin Sun to come back, and some people don't want him to come back. So, such an action is arranged." Qi Tsung-mei had already thought about this problem. At this time, she was enlightened by her father. She was stunned and said, "It's not our Qi family that wants to deal with Lin Sun?" Qi Lingxiao nodded. "Lin Sun's life is a bit complicated. It involved a past event more than 10 years ago. Everyone thought he was dead. Whoever thought that he would appear again?" "Father, who is he?" Qi Tsung-mei asked with some surprise. She didn't expect that Lin Sun's identity would cause such a big storm. Even their Qi family could only play the role of a fighter. It could be imagined how terrible the power behind all this was. "You will understand when he enters the Forbidden City." Qi Lingxiao said casually, "Mei, you did a good job in this matter. Although you failed, you have completed the task. I will deal with the rest." Until she left the study, Qi Tsung-mei was still in a trance. She thought that she would be severely punished by her father if the action failed. Whoever thought that failure could also be regarded as the completion of the task? What the hell was going on? Qi Tsung-mei felt a little confused for the first time. But soon, she judged that she could get the answer she wanted as long as she figured out the real identity of Lin Sun. "Lin Sun, who are you?" With this mystery, Qi Tsung-mei left the clan. She wanted to find out what happened in the Forbidden City more than 10 years ago. Castle of Night. The old man walked into the empty and dark hall and bowed slightly. "Miss, the action of Qi family failed. It seems that he has the qualification to be independent since he can survive." What's the reaction of the old guy on the observatory? In the darkness, the voice of the Queen of the Night was ethereal. A strange expression suddenly appeared on the old man's face. After a while, he said, he seemed to have expected this. He only said 4 words. Which 4 words? "The storm is coming." This old guy always likes to be mysterious. I like to see what kind of storm will be set off in the Forbidden City when Lin Sun arrives. On the observatory, the old man, who was called the Flamen, stood alone, leaning against the railing and looking at the stars in the sky. His eyes were as pure and clear as a child's. After a long time, he sighed with satisfaction. It's been more than 10 years in a flash. Who could have thought that the child could have a chance to return to the Forbidden City after his spiritual vein devouring abyss was dug away? The world is changeable. Chapter 3:21. Under the surging water, Lin Sun moved forward quickly as if he was walking on the flat ground. Although he was sure that his opponent was doomed to be unable to deal with him after such a great defeat, it was undoubtedly the safest to walk under the water just in case. Along the way, I have seized hundreds of short crossbows. In addition, there are a large number of spiritual weapons and elixirs. If I exchange them for money, it must be a huge fortune. As he moved forward, Lin Sun thought about it. Now there are all kinds of trophies in his small Sumeru ring, but most of them were useless. Lin Sun planned to find a chance to sell them all. After entering the Forbidden City, there would definitely be a lot of places to spend money. At the same time, Lin Sun had to take care of the resources needed for cultivation, so he had to start planning for his future survival. Splash! After half an hour, a terrible whirlpool suddenly appeared at the bottom of the water in the distance, stirring up the river and producing a terrible tearing force. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed, and he stopped. The whirlpool was extremely terrible, like a bloody mouth at the bottom of the water, which seemed to be able to tear and swallow everything. A group of fish couldn't avoid it. They were torn into pieces of flesh and blood in an instant and were swallowed by the whirlpool and disappeared. Boom! Lin Sun tried to throw a rock weighing more than 10 kilograms at the bottom of the water. With a loud noise, the rock was also crushed by the terrible whirlpool force and disappeared. Lin Sun was shocked. What a terrible force! If he approached it rashly, even a practitioner would be torn into pieces. He didn't dare to approach it anymore. He flashed to the water, tried to avoid the whirlpool on the way and detour. Unexpectedly, the higher he went, the more terrible the swallowing force produced by the whirlpool was. When Lin Sun's figure just rushed up for less than 30 meters, he felt a terrible swallowing force sweeping him, and his body flew uncontrollably to the whirlpool at the bottom of the river. Oh no! Lin Sun was so shocked that he subconsciously ran all his cultivation. His body released a bright luster, and he struggled desperately to break free. But the power of the whirlpool was too terrible. Lin Sun's struggle at the moment was enough to easily kill a practitioner of Heaven Gang Realm. But in front of the power of the whirlpool, he was like an ant trying to shake a tree. In a moment, his whole body was involved in the whirlpool. Boom! Lin Sun felt dizzy and his vision blurred, as if he had fallen into the abyss. At this moment, he inexplicably thought of the shoals of fish and rocks that had been torn into powder just now. He thought to himself that he wouldn't be reduced to such a miserable state. Then, Lin Sun felt a sudden shock and a strong sense of dizziness spread all over his body. Then he lost his senses. If there were other practitioners here, they would definitely find that at the moment when Lin Sun was involved in the whirlpool, a faint blue luster emerged from his body and covered his whole body, so that he avoided the terrible tearing force of the whirlpool without any danger. Obviously, the Amrita St. Pearl played a role at the critical moment. When Lin Sun woke up, he found himself in a clear blue river. In front of him were gorgeous corals, reflecting the colorful light of the water, which was magnificent and dreamy. The ribbon-like reeds swayed like fairies dancing. Lin Sun couldn't help being stunned by such a beautiful scene. Soon, he woke up and checked his body. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he found that he wasn't injured. Where was this? Lin Sun got up and began to look around. He was sure that he must have been involved in the underwater whirlpool, but he didn't expect that the bottom of the whirlpool led to such a beautiful and dreamy water area. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a wave in the water beside him. A big cyan fish with wings and long, colorful feathers swam past Lin Sun. Lin Sun's pupil shrank. What kind of strange fish was this? Colorful feathers, a pair of wings, green scales, dragon whiskers growing from its lips, and fiery eyes. Lin Sun tried his best to search the atlas of beasts that he had seen in his mind, but he couldn't find anything similar to this fish. Weird. Is it possible that the underwater whirlpool is a special space-time tunnel that takes me to an unknown water area? Lin Sun thought for a long time, but couldn't figure it out. Well, it's more important to find a way out first. Soon, Lin Sun put aside his distracting thoughts and walked forward. Along the way, Lin Sun saw clusters of corals, filled with the aura of treasures, and the water was dense and colorful, reflecting magnificent and dreamy halos. It was like entering the legendary place where sea god lived. It was as beautiful as a fairyland. From time to time, he could see some strange fish swimming in the water. Some had wings, some had sharp claws, some had a single horn, all kinds of strange species that he had never seen before. These fish were full of spirituality. They were not ferocious and never attacked Lin Sun, which made him feel at ease. He was really worried that if he met some terrible monsters living at the bottom of the water, he would be completely finished. He walked for dozens of kilometers in this way. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, he would eventually get tired of it. Lin Sun calmed down and concentrated on looking for a way out. Not long after, a silver brilliance as bright as stars suddenly appeared in the water in the far distance. As he neared, he could see patches of silvery light swaying in the water like a fine rain. It was like a sky full of stars illuminating that place. It was also like a miniature galaxy waterfall was fluttering, holy and magnificent. The scene was more than spectacular. It could be called a magical phenomenon of uncanny workmanship. It was so beautiful. Lin Sun's eyes were full of obsession, and his mind was also shocked. After a long time, he came to his senses. Looking carefully, he found that the bright star-like luster was actually diffused by the silver waterweeds on the ground. The silver waterweeds were extremely special. Their stems were straight and sharp like swords, and their whole bodies were silver like stars and frost. They stood there like divine, swords that could pierce the sky. What moved Lin Sun most was that the silver aquatic plant was surrounded by a pure and vigorous spiritual qi. The breath it released was fragrant, misty, and cold, which seemed to be able to seep into the depths of one's soul and make people intoxicated. There was no doubt that this was definitely a kind of rare treasure of heaven and earth. Just breathing the breath made Lin Sun's mind clear and his whole body lively, which made him feel indescribably relaxed and happy. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun stepped forward and was about to pick one up to carefully study the magical effect of this spiritual plant. Unexpectedly, the ground suddenly cracked open and a turtle drilled out. It glared angrily at Lin Sun and scolded, "Junior, which clan are you from? How dare you try to steal the elixir without even asking?" Lin Sun was shocked at once. It was the first time that he had seen a tortoise speak in human language. It was unbelievable. The tortoise slowly climbed to one side of the coral reef, stared at Lin Sun disdainfully, and said in an old voice, "Young man, why don't you speak? Is it because you have a guilty conscience?" Lin Sun took a deep breath and tried to keep himself calm. Today's situation was so bizarre and unbelievable that he would think it was a dream if he didn't see it with his own eyes. "Well, may I ask, are you a human or a demon?" Lin Sun hesitated and his eyes were full of curiosity. He had also heard that the spiritual beasts with the strength of heaven rank all had wisdom and could practice like practitioners. But it was extremely rare for them to speak, or almost all of them existed in myths and legends. "Oh, young man, how dare you slander me as a demon? I'm so angry," the tortoise yelled loudly. Hearing this, Lin Sun felt it was funny to see the angry tortoise shaking its head. He couldn't help but tease, "What kind of king are you? Tortoise king?" As soon as the words came out, the tortoise was like crazy. Its eyes were bloodshot, and it gnashed its teeth. "Tortoise? How dare you call me a tortoise? You, this junior, simply have eyes but fail to see. I'm a natural green turtle king. My bloodline is noble and unparalleled in the world. Many sea spirits in the soul oblivion have to call me Green Turtle King." Green Turtle King. It was a kind of heaven-rank spiritual beast that only existed in legends. It was said that this beast was born in the water of the 9 serenities. It was born with wisdom and great strength to control the wind and waves and control the clouds and mist. Lin Sun didn't expect that the inconspicuous tortoise in front of him was the rare Green Turtle King. But soon, he was attracted by another sentence of the Green Turtle King. "Soul, Oblivion, Sea?" As early as when he set off from Mist City, Lin Sun had heard from Shu Jin that if he set off from the east, he needed to pass through the Soul Oblivion Sea. In other words, the Soul Oblivion Sea was located in the easternmost part of the empire, and Lin Sun was in the area outside the Yellow Dragon City before he was involved in the underwater whirlpool. Just a little calculation showed that the Yellow Dragon City and the Soul Oblivion Sea were thousands of miles away. This feeling of dislocation of time and space made Lin Sun a little confused for a while. According to Shu Jin, the Soul Oblivion Sea would enter a turbulent period at this time of year. There would be terrible natural disasters, storms, tsunamis, and there were many fierce beasts in the sea. No practitioner dared to enter the soul oblivion sea at this time. Even the practitioners of Tao Insight Realm could only retreat. If this was really the soul oblivion sea, didn't it mean that he had come to the easternmost sea from the middle of the empire by accident? Young man, are you listening to me? Green Turtle King shouted and seemed to be very dissatisfied with Lin Sun's attitude. Oh, Lin Sun seemed to wake up from a dream and forced himself to restrain the distracting thoughts in his mind. Looking at Green Turtle King on the opposite side, he suddenly thought of something. He bowed and said respectfully, "Senior, the reason why I was rude just now is that I am ignorant. I am just like a frog in a well looking at the sky and Hebo watching the sea. I don't know that there is a unique existence like you in this world. I am shocked and can't help myself." Hearing this, Green Turtle King immediately smiled and said, "Haha, you're a good talker. The unique you said is very good. It's very suitable for me, especially since you're able to recognize your own ignorance. This prince can't bear to criticize you anymore." Lin Sun also laughed in his heart. Sure enough, Green Turtle King liked to be praised and flattered. This had been revealed from the posture it showed when talking to him before. This was easy to handle. As long as Green Turtle King liked it, Lin Sun didn't believe that he couldn't get something useful from it. Chapter 3:22. Sure enough, Green Turtle King was coaxed by Lin's intention to please him. He laughed again and again as if he regretted not meeting Lin earlier and regarded Lin as his confidant. Lin Sun took the opportunity to throw out several questions without leaving any trace and got the answers one by one. It turned out that this water area was indeed located in the Soul Oblivion Sea, which was tens of thousands of miles away from the land of Xiao Empire. According to Green Turtle King, there were many practitioners who could reach this sea area in the past 1,000 years, but there were very few of them. The reason was that this sea area was too far away and the road was full of dangers. Even the strong men of Tao Insight Realm would die if they came here. This fact was a great blow to Lin Sun. He had worked hard just to get to the Forbidden City. How could he expect that in a twinkling of an eye, he came to this strange sea area tens of thousands of miles away from Xiao Empire? According to Green Turtle King, even if he returned to Xiao Empire at this moment, it would take him 3 or 5 months to get there, not to mention the dangers he would encounter on the way. By the way, Green Turtle King suddenly asked, "You are so weak that a green magic shark can easily eat you. How could you come here?" Lin Sun sighed in his heart and told his experience without concealing it. Whoever thought that when Green Turtle King heard all this, he shouted excitedly, "Void Vortex! You brat actually entered the Void Whirlpool. God, you're not dead yet. It's a miracle. It's a miracle." Lin Sun almost rolled his eyes. It was a miracle that he was not dead. "Senior, what's the matter with this Void Vortex?" Lin Sun asked. Green Turtle King didn't answer, but looked at Lin Sun with burning eyes and said excitedly, "Boy, I guess you must have a treasure that can avoid the void turbulence, right?" Green Turtle King seemed extremely excited at this moment. He almost danced with joy. "I'm saved. I'm finally saved. I've been trapped in this damn sea area for 800 years. My savior finally comes." Ha 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 ha! Lin Sun was stunned. This guy called himself Green Turtle King and was worshipped by many sea monsters, but he was trapped here? All of a sudden, Lin Sun was worried. Was this a boastful tortoise? If he was really so powerful, how could he be trapped in the sea? What a joke! Who had ever seen Green Turtle King, a legendary heaven-ranked spirit beast that could control wind, waves, clouds, and mist, being trapped in the seawater that it was most familiar with? Green Turtle King seemed to notice the change of Lin Sun's eyes. He suddenly stopped laughing and coughed. "Young man, don't think too much. Although I'm powerful, there is still a little power in the world that I can't compete with." Its expression was solemn, and its heavy expression carried a trace of a sigh as it continued. "This expanse of the sea is extremely special. It's an ancient ruin, and its surroundings are filled with mysterious energy of divinity. Not to mention this king, even a life and death realm expert would be utterly incapable of leaving once trapped here." Lin Sun was shocked. An ancient relic? This was simply beyond his imagination. Even life and death realm warriors were trapped, unable to escape. What kind of horrifying power was needed to achieve this? After all, this was a ruin that had existed for countless years, yet the energy of divinity that filled this place was still so formidable, and this was too astounding. Fortunately, you are here. Suddenly, Green Turtle King became excited again. It looked at Lin Sun with scorching eyes, as if it was looking at a rare treasure, revealing endless hope and desire. This is fate. It proves that I am not destined to die. Lin Sun smiled bitterly. Senior, don't be happy too early. I still don't know how to get out of here. Green Turtle King said, it's very simple. You have a treasure that can shuttle through the void vortex, which is enough to take me away. As it said, it looked far away in the sea and said, the exit is over there. I didn't dare to approach it before, but now it's different. Lin Sun finally realized that the so-called treasure of Green Turtle King must be the Amrita's St. Pearl in his sea of consciousness. But Lin Sun didn't know how this treasure could have the magical effect of shuttling through the void vortex. Seeing Lin Sun's hesitation, Green Turtle King rolled his eyes and seemed to understand something. He smiled and pointed to the silver seaweed on the ground nearby and said, look, young man, this is the silver frost swordgrass, which only exists in ancient times. It can be called the first-class immortal medicine in the world. As expected, Lin Sun was attracted by these words. Green Turtle King said proudly, since it is called an immortal medicine, it naturally has incredible magical effects. If it is swallowed, it can bring the dead back to life. It can also refine the body, strengthen the root, and promote cultivation. Once it is in the outside world, even the King of Tao Insight Realm will fight for it, and the King of Life-Death Realm will also covet it. So powerful. Lin Sun was shocked in his heart. Green Turtle King said lightly, it's nonsense. If it weren't for looking for these treasures, how could I break into this place? Lin Sun doubted. Then why don't you take it for your own use? Green Turtle King said, young man, you underestimate me too much. I have swallowed no less than hundreds of silver frost swordgrass during the years I was trapped here. My cultivation has already reached the limit, so this thing is no longer useful to me. Speaking of this, he sighed with emotion in a calm tone. The world regards it as a treasure, but it's of little value to me. It's tasteless to eat it and a pity to throw it away. When you're like this king and have already reached the realm of the boundless life and death, guided by the Grand Tao, you'll understand this principle. Lin Sun directly ignored the boastful words and accurately judged that Green Turtle King had eaten too many immortal medicines and was tired of them. So he introduced these to Lin Sun. Young man, it's fate that we meet. These are my gifts to you. Green Turtle King said leisurely. Thank you for your kindness, senior. Lin Sun said with a smile. No matter how much Green Turtle King boasted, he was very sure that the silver frost swordgrass must be a first-class treasure in the world. Wait a minute. This thing is not easy to preserve. It will die when you touch it and burn when you meet fire. If you can't preserve it well, it will disappear immediately. Seeing that Lin Sun was about to take action, Green Turtle King quickly opened his mouth and spat out a green cloud from his mouth. It turned into a big net and completely covered the silver frost swordgrass. Under Lin Sun's strange gaze, the silver frost swordgrass was uprooted and completely shrouded in a bubble-like cyan-like curtain. Young man, this is a little gift from me. Please accept it. With the protection of my power, the silver frost swordgrass can be preserved intact. Green Turtle King said proudly, when you want to use it, just take it out of the light curtain with spiritual power. Thank you for your help, senior. Without hesitation, Lin Sun immediately opened the small Sumeru ring and put all the dozens of silver frost swordgrass into it. Ha ha ha, young man, can you take me away with you now? Green Turtle King asked with a smile. Lin Sun thought about it and said with a smile, Senior, since you are so sure that I can take you away, we should be able to leave at any time. But it's not easy to get the ancient relics. It's a pity to leave in a hurry. Green Turtle King was stunned and said in surprise, I didn't expect that you have such a big appetite. Lin Sun said with a smile. Isn't it a waste to leave the treasures in this relic here? Green Turtle King pondered for a while and said, To be honest, the treasures on the first floor of this relic have been collected by me. These can't be given to you, but there are some gadgets that may be useful to you. Come with me. Green Turtle King's figure flashed and went to the sea ahead. The first floor of the relic. Lin Sun thought of something and followed them. The further forward they went, the clearer the seawater became, and the water was filled with an indescribably mysterious energy. Even though it didn't affect their movements, it struck directly at the heart, caused their souls to tremble, and caused them to feel a terrifying, oppressive aura. As they moved forward, even Green Turtle King seldom spoke and became solemn. Suddenly, a small tree that was fiery red in color surged up into appearance at the side of a rock at the bottom of the water in the distance. Its stem was hard like blades, and numerous thumb-sized bright red fruits hung on its branches, causing them to seem like numerous little suns that were dazzling and resplendent. True Yang Dragon Marrow Fruit, which can open up spiritual wisdom and stimulate the power of understanding, was a rare magical medicine at that time. But a practitioner could only swallow one. It was useless to swallow more. Green Turtle King waved its front claws, and the 24 true Yang Dragon Marrow fruits on the small tree were picked and thrown to Lin Sun. Lin Sun quickly took out a jade bottle, carefully put these treasures in it, and sealed them. Then he put them in the small Sumeru ring. Before long, Green Turtle King rushed into the depths of a dense blue seaweed. When it came back, it had a shiny purple or the size of a copper coin in its claws. Purple elf iron can be used to refine spiritual weapons. Spiritual tattooists among you human beings should like it very much. I heard that it can play a big role in refining armors with spiritual tattoos. But for me, it is worthless. Green Turtle King said, and threw it to Lin Sun like throwing garbage. Lin Sun was extremely excited. Purple elf iron. He was very clear about this treasure. Although it was as small as a copper coin, its value was immeasurable, because when refining armors with spiritual tattoos, it only needed to grind some dust from this object and smelt it with other spiritual materials, which could greatly improve the success rate of refining armors with spiritual tattoos. In this way, Green Turtle King searched as it moved forward. It was obviously very familiar with this sea area. It collected more than 10 kinds of rare treasures almost without any effort. Of course, in the eyes of Green Turtle King, these were the leftovers of little use. But for Lin Sun, these treasures were all the treasures in the world. Their value was so great that it could not be estimated at all. At this time, Lin Sun had completely forgotten to leave. He was in a state of excitement. What could make him happier than searching for treasures in ancient relics? This feeling was simply too infatuating. Chapter 323. Snow Ginseng, 9 twists red core iron, spirit flower of purity and nihility with 36 leaves, precious thunder crystal with original spiritual power. Along the way, Lin Sun couldn't help trembling when he thought of the names of these treasures. These were all rare treasures that only existed in ancient times. Looking the whole empire, they were rare in the world. Perhaps they could only be seen in the royal treasury of the empire with the most abundant heritage. But now, these treasures were thrown to Lin Sun by Green Turtle King like garbage, which made Lin Sun fall into a state of ecstasy. These are all treasures that Green Turtle King doesn't like. I don't know how rare the treasures that have been picked up by it are. Lin Sun's thoughts drifted. It was said that wealth moved people's hearts. In the face of so many natural treasures, Lin Sun couldn't help being tempted. This was normal. Not to mention Green Turtle King. Even a strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm would not be better than Lin Sun. We can't go forward. The second floor of the relic is far away. The divine power is too horrible, let alone entering it. We will be killed in an instant if we just get close to it. Suddenly, Green Turtle King, who led the way in front, stopped and said in a dignified voice. Lin Sun suddenly sobered up and looked up. He saw that the sea in the far distance was no longer blue. Instead, it was covered with a layer of deep and cold air. It was as deep as the entrance to the abyss, which made his heart palpitate. Just at a glance, Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. His hair stood on end. He felt a kind of fatal terror inside and outside his body. It seemed that the aura alone could easily wipe him out. Immediately, Green Turtle King turned around and returned to the original road. Senior, how can there be a second floor of this relic? Lin Sun hurriedly caught up with it. As far as I know, the scope of this ancient relic is so large that it can be called a world. It is densely covered with taboos and full of countless dangers. There's not only the second floor, but also the third, the fourth, and the fifth floor, Green Turtle King said casually. As for how many floors there are, even I don't know. But it is certain that in today's world, only the life-death realm is able to go to the second floor of the relic. Lin Sun's heart was surging. Only then did he realize that the relic handed down from ancient times was bigger than he thought. In the first level, he was able to obtain so many treasures of heaven and earth. Then, what kind of shocking treasures would be hidden in the second level? Based on this deduction, the higher the level of the ruins, the more valuable the items hidden within would be. Lin Sun's heart was burning with excitement. If it weren't for his lack of strength, he would really like to explore and see how many secrets were hidden in the ancient relic. But soon Lin Sun calmed down. As Green Turtle King said, the ruins were full of taboos and dangers. Even life-death realm kings were only qualified to explore the second layer of the ruins. It could be imagined how dangerous it would be in the depths of the ruins. "Why don't you go?" asked Lin Sun. Although this king is confident that his strength has reached the first-rate standard in the world, this king does not dare to rashly take his own life as a joke. This second level of the ruins. Speaking of this, Green Turtle King seemed to sigh unwillingly. It's not something I can get involved in now. Once I get involved in it, I will die. It's full of killing intent and variables. I can only give up. Lin Sun knew that Green Turtle King liked to brag. Although its words were exaggerated, Green Turtle King's fear of the second level of the relic was real. Lin Sun could still distinguish it. Before long, Green Turtle King took Lin Sun to a turbulent sea. At the first sight, Lin Sun saw a familiar underwater vortex, which was spinning wildly in the distance, setting off countless terrible vortexes and waves. There was no doubt that the terrible tearing force was enough to crush and devour everything. When Lin Sun was at the bottom of the river outside the Yellow Dragon City, he was swept away by such a vortex and came to the ancient relic in the Soul Oblivion Sea. That's the Void Vortex. There was a deep hatred in Green Turtle King's eyes. Although it is located at the bottom of the sea, the depth of the vortex is connected to the void turbulence. Once involved in it, no practitioner in the world can survive. Unfortunately, it is also the only exit to leave this ancient relic. If not, how can I be trapped here for thousands of years? There was a strong resentment in Green Turtle King's voice. "Senior, are you sure that as long as I pass through here smoothly, I can return to the original place?" Lin Sun pondered. It's hard to say. The mystery of the void turbulence is too profound and obscure. Even I can't understand it. But I'm sure that if I want to leave this place, I can only pass through it. When Green Turtle King said this, his eyes had become scorching. He stared at Lin Sun and said, "Young man, I treated you well before. Now, would you like to leave with me?" "Of course," Lin Sun said happily. "Great." Green Turtle King looked up to the sky and laughed. But when Lin Sun was about to take action, Green Turtle King suddenly stopped him. "Wait." Lin Sun was shocked and looked at Green Turtle King. He was not sure what it was going to do. But Green Turtle King was stunned. It seemed that it was extremely complicated, with reluctance and confusion. Finally, it became open-minded and said, "Is there any wine?" "Yes." Lin Sun's small Sumru ring often stored some wine. He didn't drink it himself, but he had the habit of buying wine for Shu Jin in Mist City. "Once we enter the Void Vortex, you and I may be completely separated. Why don't we take this opportunity to have a drink?" Green Turtle King looked at Lin Sun with a trace of expectation. It had been trapped here for thousands of years. It was lonely and had no one to talk to. Now it was going to leave, but it was reluctant and emotional. That's great. Lin Sun said, took out the wine, and drank with Green Turtle King on the bottom of the sea. After drinking, Green Turtle King really regarded Lin Sun as a confidant and said the words that had been suppressed in his heart for a long time. Or it was more like a kind of catharsis after a long time of loneliness. If one hadn't been trapped for thousands of years, he couldn't appreciate it. Lin Sun drank with a smile and listened like a patient listener. It turned out that Green Turtle King came from a place called Azure Light Island in the depths of Soul Oblivion Sea. It called itself King Green Turtle King. It was an overlord in the Azure Light Island Sea area and deterred all directions. But later, in order to break through the realm of cultivation, it mistakenly entered this ancient relic and was trapped for thousands of years. Until it met Lin Sun now, it found a glimmer of hope to get out of trouble. What surprised Lin Sun was that Green Turtle King was more than 2,600 years old according to its age. But in the branch of Green Turtle King, it just left the juvenile stage at the age of 2,000 years. Now it could only be regarded as a growth period, far from adulthood. In other words, Green Turtle King was no different from a teenager among human beings. Lin Sun suddenly realized that although this guy's tone was old, his temperament was very lively and liked to be praised. He was proud and vain, which was no different from a teenager. But when he thought that Green Turtle King had lived for more than 2,000 years, Lin Sun always felt a little awkward to regard it as a teenager. When Lin Sun drank up all the wine, Green Turtle King said with emotion, "Brother Lin, when you reach Tao Insight Realm, you will understand that the world is bigger than you think. Compared with the whole world, Xiao Empire is just a small place. If you want to travel around the world in the future, you can come to Azure Light Island to find me. I will take you to see the real immortals." After a hearty drink, Green Turtle King had changed the way he addressed Lin Sun. He regarded Lin Sun as his brother and talked less with him. At this moment, his emotion was obviously from the bottom of his heart. Lin Sun's heart was also surging with warmth. He never thought that he not only came to the depths of the sea area tens of thousands of miles away from Xiao Empire by accident, but also got to know an intelligent and psychic Green Turtle King. This made Lin Sun sigh with emotion about the impermanence of the world, and he couldn't help but feel extremely happy about this accidental meeting with Green Turtle King. "Brother Green Turtle King, don't worry. I will visit you after I solve all the troubles in the future," Lin Sun said freely and promised happily. Green Turtle King laughed up to the sky and stopped talking. He rushed to the underwater whirlpool in the distance with Lin Sun. Rumble, the whirlpool rotated, and the water waves surged with terrible devouring and tearing power. In just a moment, Lin Sun and Green Turtle King were involved in it. At the moment when he lost consciousness, Lin Sun saw clearly that Green Turtle King turned into a tall and extremely handsome young man in a green robe. It turned out that this guy had cultivated to the point where he could transform into a human body. When this thought flashed through his mind, Lin Sun only felt black in front of his eyes. His body seemed to be dragged by an invisible big hand and disappeared in the vast void turbulence. Clatter, the sound of rapid water, awakened Lin Sun. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he was still at the bottom of the water. But at this moment, he could clearly feel that he was not in the ancient relic. Shaking his head, Lin Sun took a deep breath and rushed up. In an instant, he came to the river, which was more than 300 meters high. The night sky was as dark as ink, and the stars were bright. On both sides of the river, there were rolling mountains. From time to time, there were roars of fierce birds and beasts. Lin Sun observed silently for a moment and finally confirmed that he had returned to the Empire, and his position was on the way of the river outside the Yellow Dragon City. Lin Sun found a rock at random and sat down. There was still a trace of trance between his eyebrows. He suspected that everything he had experienced before was like a bizarre dream. But when he checked the treasures in the small Sumeru ring, Lin Sun was completely sober. It was not a dream, but a real thing. And it was the mysterious, void whirlpool at the bottom of the river that caused all this. It was like a mysterious tunnel to communicate with the void, which could produce incredible void-moving power. "Take care," Lin Sun murmured in his heart, and the figure of Green Turtle King appeared in his mind. Whoosh! Without any hesitation, Lin Sun flashed forward in the night. Since he came back safely, it was time to hurry to the Forbidden City. Chapter 324. Half a month later, in Wutu City. As one of the closest cities to the Forbidden City, Wutu City was also extremely famous in the Empire. Together with the other 11 cities, it surrounded the Forbidden City like a ring of stars. It was not only prosperous but also occupied by many powerful forces. At noon, the sun was high in the sky. It was dry and hot. On the spacious official road, more than 10 miles away from Wutu City, a young man came. He was dressed in plain clothes, and his black hair was tied behind his head with a straw rope at will, revealing a delicate and resolute face with a pair of deep black eyes and a faint smile on his lips. This man was Lin Sun. When he saw the majestic outline of Wutu City from a distance, Lin Sun's spirit was refreshed, and he quickened his pace. It had been more than a month since he left Mist City. Now, he finally came to the nearest city to the Forbidden City, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. He knew that as long as he stepped into Wutu City, he would no longer be afraid of the Qi family. As one of the 12 cities guarding the capital, there were many military forces stationed in Wutu City. There were many practitioners and clans in the city. Even the Qi family didn't dare to deal with him blatantly here. When I enter Wutu City, I will hire a chariot directly and try to get into the Forbidden City before the night falls, Lin Sun thought as he moved forward. At this time, a stream of light suddenly flew from the distant void. It was a young man who was flying on a sword. He had sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. He wore a golden feather crown on his head. When he flew, the sword light was whistling and his sleeves were fluttering. See Spirit Realm. Lin Sun was slightly shocked. He couldn't believe his eyes. The young man was only 12 or 13 years old at most. There was still a touch of childishness between his eyebrows, but he could fly in the air, and his whole body was filled with purple air. His momentum was extremely aggressive. It was the first time for Lin Sun to see such a young practitioner of Sea Spirit Realm. He was always regarded as a monster in the past, but compared with the young man, he seemed to be dwarfed. To Lin Sun's surprise, the young man on the sword rushed towards him with a fierce look. "Are you Lin Sun?" The teenager stopped in a void and looked down at Lin Sun with his cold eyes. "You recognize me?" Lin Sun was surprised. "It really is you. I've been waiting for you here for more than half a month. Now it's time to kill you." The young man's expression was indifferent, and his entire body was overflowing with purple qi. His entire body was like a sharp sword that had been drawn out of its sheath, revealing its edge and surging killing intent. Before Lin Sun could react, he waved his hand, and the spiritual sword under his feet broke through the air with a clang. Qi! A surging and magnificent sword qi flashed out. It was over 30 meters long, and it easily sliced through the air before descending to the ground like a bolt of lightning. In that instant, heaven and earth changed color, and the void seemed to be wailing. Almost subconsciously, Lin Sun dodged to one side. The sword light was so terrible that it was filled with the power of heaven and earth, which made him feel extreme danger. Boom! A perfectly straight crack appeared on the ground, extending for several tens of feet. Smoke and dust filled the air. Lin Sun only felt a pain in his left arm. When he dodged just now, he was scratched by the sword qi, and a piece of flesh was cut off. Blood flowed out. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly became cold and indifferent, and an uncontrollable killing intent surged in his heart. As soon as they met, Lin Sun was caught off guard and was almost killed. How could Lin Sun not be angry? Bang! Without any hesitation, Lin Sun used the only meteor's crossbow he had left. Spiritual arrows as bright as silver frost and as dreamy as stars suddenly burst out like fireworks. In the past, Lin Sun could achieve miraculous effects and cause serious injuries to the enemy with meteor's crossbow. However, there was a sudden change at this moment. When the dazzling spiritual arrows rushed to within 30 meters of the teenager, they suddenly stopped and stagnated there, as if they were tightly grasped by an invisible hand. Chi, chi, chi. Violet chi rose from the young man's body and transformed into a dense electric net that flickered with bright lights. In merely an instant, the dazzling spirit arrows were covered and melted by the violet lightning like snow melting in water, and they vanished completely. Around his body, the spiritual chi was transformed into thunder and lightning by the momentum of heaven and earth. Ignoring attacks, this kind of power could be regarded as a superb means in the sea spirit realm. Only those who mastered ancient and powerful secret methods could exert it. Protective force. This guy has such attainments in cultivation at such a young age. He is by no means a nobody. Lin Sun was shocked. The sea spirit realm had begun to control and understand all the mysteries between heaven and earth. They had powerful means to manipulate thunder and fire, fly in the sky and earth, kill people from a distance, control the momentum of heaven and earth, and so on. Stepping into this realm was equivalent to stepping onto the path of cultivation that allowed one to ascend to the heavens. One would be able to soar through the clouds, summon the wind, and summon the rain. There were countless practitioners in the world, but there was only 1 in 10,000 who could reach the sea spirit realm. And to be able to step into the spiritual ocean tier in his teens like the youngster in front of him, and to grasp an extremely profound secret technique was even more rare in the world and could be said to be peerless. Although Lin Sun could crush the Heaven Gang practitioners in the Earth Gang realm, he still felt great pressure in the face of such an outstanding teenager in the Sea Spirit realm. You can resist my blow in the Earth Gang realm. You're also a top figure, but for me, it is far from enough. In the blink of an eye, after neutralizing the meteor crossbow's attack, the young man's expression remained indifferent as he flicked his finger in the air. With a swish, a mass of purple mist turned into 3-sword chi, which flew more than 30 meters away and slashed across the air. The terrible sword chi seemed to tear the void, which was extremely fierce and terrible. Bang, bang, bang. Lin Sun had no strength to resist at all, so he could only dodge with all his strength. Although he narrowly avoided the 3-sword chi, his left leg, back, and shoulder were injured again. Blood was dripping, and the white bones could be vaguely seen. It was terrible. Only when Lin Sun faced the strong in the gang spirit realm could he understand the horror of this realm. It was enough to easily suppress the practitioners in the gang spirit realm without any suspense. Although the Zing battleship was strong, it had no wisdom after all, unlike the practitioners who mastered secret methods and had wisdom. Once they fought, the power was quite different. What? The young man couldn't help but be slightly surprised when Lin Sun dodged his second attack, and then his face sank as he said coldly, "Let me see how long an ant like you can struggle for." He reached out his hand and grasped in the void. Clang! The spirit sword rose into the air and revolved ceaselessly around his body, spewing out a terrifying and awe-inspiring power of the sword Tao. The void here collapsed and turned into a vacuum. The terrifying sword chi was accumulating power. There was no doubt that when this sword was unleashed, it would definitely be an earth-shattering strike. There was no way to avoid or escape because Lin Sun's chi had been completely locked. At this moment, Lin Sun gritted his teeth fiercely. All the power in his body was mobilized, rumbling and boiling. In his right hand, the flowing light saber rang. In the inside of his left hand, a pigeon egg-sized black bead was quietly clasped. When the confrontation was about to break out, suddenly, a gentle and kind voice sounded in the distance. "If you dare to fight, I will kill you here." The teenager's face changed, and a ruthless look flashed between his eyebrows. The spiritual sword, which had been accumulating power for a long time, rushed out violently. Boom! The void was crushed and collapsed inch by inch. But halfway, the spiritual sword was caught by an old hand. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't get rid of it. At the same time, an old man appeared. His tall and thin figure, like a mountain across the world, stood in front of Lin Sun. "How dare you stop me, old man?" The teenager was furious and shouted. The old man flicked his finger, and the spiritual sword broke in the middle with a crack. The teenager seemed to suffer from the backfire. His face suddenly turned pale, and he groaned. "If you don't leave after 3 breaths, you will die here." The old man's voice was still gentle and kind, but there was no emotion in it, as if he was talking about a trivial matter. The teenager's face changed. He gritted his teeth angrily. "I'll remember what you did today. One day, I will pay you back 10 times. After that, he flung his sleeves and flew away. Until the teenager's figure disappeared completely, the old man turned around and looked at Lin Sun. He said apologetically, "I didn't expect that the kid of Chief family would come to deal with you regardless of all obstacles." Lin Sun shook his head. "It's okay. Thank you for your timely help." As he spoke, he silently bandaged his wounds. He looked calm, even abnormally calm. After cleaning the wounds, he asked, "Senior, who is that person?" Qi Songfeng, one of the most outstanding disciples of this generation of Qi family. He was born with the bloodline of Golden Sea and Purple Lotus. His talent is unparalleled. The old man explained casually. He didn't praise Qi Songfeng, but told the truth. Qi Songfeng was indeed an extremely dazzling, peerless genius, which was recognized by many big shots in the Forbidden City. "Why does he want to kill me?" Lin Sun continued to ask. "Because of summer solstice." The old man gave an unexpected answer, which made Lin Sun slightly stunned. After a while, he frowned and asked, "What's going on?" The old man thought and said, "It's a long story. Come with me. When we enter the Forbidden City, I will tell you everything you want to know." Lin Sun nodded. Immediately, the old man waved his sleeves, and a soft force poured out, holding him and Lin Sun up in the air and flew far away. Lin Sun quietly put away the black bead on the inside of his left hand. This bead was called Sky Shocking Bead. It was refined by Green Turtle King in order to kill time when it was trapped in the ancient relic for thousands of years. It was so powerful that it could hurt the strong of Tao Insight Realm. However, it was extremely difficult and complicated to refine. Green Turtle King only successfully refined 9 beads in thousands of years. When they separated, he generously gave Lin Sun 3 beads for self-defense. If the old man didn't appear before, Lin Sun would never mind to try the power of Sky Shocking Bead with Qi Songfeng. Unfortunately, the opportunity had been missed. He could only wait for another chance to use it in the future. Chapter 325. High in the sky, the wind was as sharp as a knife. With the old man's help, Lin Sun experienced the feeling of flying in the void for the first time in his life. In the distant sea of clouds, the clouds rolled like waves. On the earth, the mountains were like rocks, the lakes were like drops of water, and the cities were like orderly chessboards, which seemed very small. The feeling of overlooking the mountains and rivers and overlooking the wind and clouds made Lin Sun's mind broadened. The original resentment caused by the sudden killing also dissipated a lot. "Miss and I both know that you are stopped from going to the Forbidden City this time, but we can't stop it because all this is related to your test." The old man's words shocked Lin Sun. He restrained his mind and had no time to pay attention to other scenery. You probably have guessed that if Qi family really wants to kill you, they don't need to do this at all. They just need to send a practitioner of Sea Spirit Realm to kill you. Although the old man's words were not polite, what he said was the truth. Lin Sun had guessed this before, but he didn't understand the reason. Perhaps it was because he had confirmed that Lin Sun had passed the test. The old man no longer concealed as before when talking, but became frank and direct. "Why?" Lin Sun couldn't help asking. "Because of your life experience." The old man's voice was gentle and low. A few words made Lin Sun stiff all over and a little wave in his mind. Finally, was he going to tell me the truth? Lin Sun had been looking for and waiting for such a moment for a long time. On the day he walked out of the mine prison, he firmly set foot on the road to Xiao Empire. Wasn't it just to find out his life experience? Now that he knew about his past, he would know who was the one who dug away his natal spirit vein. "Senior, please tell me." Lin Sun took a deep breath and asked seriously. Somehow, the old man suddenly looked complicated. After a while, he nodded and said, "I promised you that when you enter the Forbidden City, I will tell you some truth. Now it's time. A touch of reminiscence appeared in the old man's eyes. Your father's name is Lin Wenjing. He is an influential figure in the Lin family in the Forbidden City. He has superior talent and unparalleled power. He is unanimously favored by all the people in the Lin family. Almost without any suspense, he becomes the first successor to take over the power of the Lin family. Lin Wenjing, Lin clan. Lin Sun repeated it in his heart, looking silent. Your mother's name is Luo Qingxuan. Her parents died when she was young, and she was the only one left in the family. At a very young age, she already possessed extraordinary talent for cultivation. Coupled with her intelligence, she embarked on the path of cultivation by chance. From then on, she passed the county test, state test, province test, and nation test, and successfully entered Green Deer School to cultivate. If I remember correctly, she should be the first in the nation test 17 years ago. Oh, by the way, your father was second, just behind your mother. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help being shocked. It turned out that his mother was so powerful. He was born in a humble and poor family, but he was able to rise all the way and win the supreme glory of the Empire Nation test in one fell swoop. This was like a legend. Since Lin Sun started his cultivation, he knew very well how hard it was to work hard to get such glory in a short time from a poor place. However, it was obvious that his mother, whom he had never met, was also a legendary woman who was not inferior to any man. The old man's voice was gentle, and he told to pass one by one. After Luo Qingxuan and Lin Wenjing passed the nation test, they entered Green Deer School to cultivate. In the second year after they entered Green Deer School, they fell in love with each other and finally determined their relationship. They wanted to get married, but unexpectedly, they were unanimously opposed by the Lin clan. Lin family all believed that Lin Wenjing was the future heir of Lin family, who had a noble status and represented the dignity of the whole Lin family. Although Luo Qingxuan's talent was outstanding, she was born in a poor family at the bottom, so she didn't deserve to marry Lin Wenjing at all. If Lin Wenjing wanted Luo Qingxuan to enter the gate of Lin family, it was possible, but she could never become Lin Wenjing's legal wife. She could only be a concubine. At that time, Lin Wenjing naturally didn't agree. Regardless of all resistance, he resolutely chose to be with Luo Qingxuan, which made Lin family completely furious and wanted to dismiss Lin Wenjing's qualification as heir. But in the end, Lin Wenjing's father came forward and made a compromise, no longer stopping Lin Wenjing and Luo Qingxuan from being together. This storm was resolved. Lin Wenjing and Luo Qingxuan finally came together and became the immortal couple envied by everyone in the Forbidden City. After several years, when Luo Qingxuan was about to give birth after 10 months of pregnancy, a disaster happened. Speaking of this, the old man's voice became low. Lin Sun was also nervous and pursed his lips. He had long guessed that since the murderer dug away his spiritual vein, the disaster must have happened when he was just born. The situation at that time was so sudden that almost no one understood what happened at that time. But it is certain that on the night you were born, your father Lin Wenjing was killed on the spot and your mother was missing. The whole Lin clan was completely in a great turmoil. The old man said slowly. Later, the news came out that all the lineal clansmen of your father's line were killed that night. No one was spared. Hearing this, Lin Sun suddenly felt an unspeakable pain in his heart. Although he had never met his parents and even had no feelings for them, it was hard for Lin Sun to bear the tragedy they encountered. He had thought that if his parents were still alive, there might be a possibility of reunion. He even harbored a strand of resentment in his heart, and he wanted to personally ask his parents why they had watched him be killed all those years ago when he found them. But when he learned that his father Lin Wenjing had been killed, his mother was missing, and even his father's lineal clansmen were killed, Lin Sun suddenly felt empty in his heart. His chest seemed to be stuffed with a huge stone, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. He pursed his lips tightly and clenched his fists quietly, trying to hold back the rolling emotions in his heart. Who was the murderer? Lin Sun's voice became extremely hoarse, as if it was squeezed out from his chest. Yin Qingbai. There was a touch of complexity in the old man's eyes. Why did he do this? Lin Sun's voice trembled a little. It seemed that he could hardly bear the tumbling emotions in his heart. No one knows. The old man sighed. Lin Sun was stunned. The old man continued. The reason is that Yun Qingbai is not a practitioner of Xiao Empire at all. He comes from a mysterious orthodoxy called Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect. Lin Sun looked a little confused. Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect. It was the first time he had heard of this name. It was so strange. The old man nodded. Yes, Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect is located on the Green Darkness. It's an ancient territory with many orthodoxies. Speaking of this, the old man changed the topic and said, You just need to remember that Yun Qingbai has a great background. The Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect behind him is so powerful that even the top figures of the empire are afraid of it. Lin Sun was silent. Yun Qingbai, Heaven-Reaching Sword Sect. Lin Sun firmly remembered these two names. One was a person, and the other was a sect. He could even be sure that it was Yun Qingbai who dug away his spiritual vein, devouring abyss. No matter what, I will find you. Lin Sun seemed extremely calm at this moment. He was so calm that he didn't look like a young man. He seemed to be emotionless, which was extremely abnormal. The old man was also keenly aware of this. Even he was a little surprised. He thought that Lin Sun would be unable to bear such a blow and lose control of his emotions. But none of this happened. On the contrary, Lin Sun seemed to be calmer than the old man at this moment, which was incredible. The old man was slightly stunned. Then he calmed down and said, Now, you should know your identity, right? Lin Sun nodded and said, Thank you for telling me. I will never forget your great kindness. The old man sighed in his heart and didn't say much. He was a little unaccustomed to the young man in front of him, as if he had suddenly become another person. Senior, does Qi family want to stop me from entering the Forbidden City because of my background? Lin Sun suddenly asked. The old man shook his head. It's not so simple. It has something to do with your background and Lin family behind you. Lin Sun was stunned. Lin family? The old man said, That's right. That year, the Lin family suffered a calamity. As the patriarch, your grandfather was killed. Even your father, the successor, was unfortunately killed. It could be said that the Lin family was without a leader, causing the entire Lin family to fall into an intense internal strife. Under such circumstances, your Lin family was like a piece of coveted fat. Some top forces in the Forbidden City took the opportunity to rush up and divide up most of the property and resources that originally belonged to your Lin family. Your Lin family suffered a great loss and fell into a state of decline. Lin Sun suddenly felt an inexplicable anger in his heart. What's the difference between this and robbers who took advantage of the situation? Didn't the clansmen of Lin family resist and just watch all this happen? The old man sneered. They only cared about internal strife and fighting for power. How could they resist the annexation of those aristocratic families? The saddest thing is that many clansmen of Lin family have already colluded with those aristocratic families in order to seize power. They cooperated with each other to divide the industry and resources of Lin family. Hearing this, the anger in Lin Sun's heart was about to explode. His father and grandfather were dead, and his mother was missing. Those clansmen didn't seek revenge. Instead, they fought with each other for power and profits. They even colluded with foreign enemies to divide the industry belonging to Lin family. It was unforgivable. Seeing Lin Sun's gloomy face, the old man couldn't help sighing. This is the fate of aristocratic families. When they lose their backbone, they are doomed to become the food in the eyes of their opponents. Everyone wants to take a bite and step on it. They can't wait to destroy it and never have a chance to rise again. For those opponents, this is naturally the result they want to see the most. P.S. More chapters are sent. This chapter is very difficult to write. Please read it slowly. There's a lot of information. Chapter 326. Lin Sun fell into silence. He should have been very happy to know his life experience, but he couldn't be happy at all after learning that his father was killed, his mother was missing, and his grandfather and other lineal clansmen were all killed. What's more, there was a monstrous hatred in his heart. The great Lin family fell into internal strife because of the struggle for power and profit of those clansmen. Many big forces in the Forbidden City took the opportunity to divide the family. Lin Sun didn't know who to hate. Should he hate the incompetence of those clansmen? Should he hate those powerful families who divided the foundation of Lin family, who took advantage of the situation? Or should he hate all of them? How sad. Lin Sun thought of the old man's sigh just now, and he couldn't help but feel sad in his heart. This was the end of Lin family that year. Senior, is Chi family one of the main culprits who divided the foundation of Lin family that year? So they stopped me from going to the Forbidden City? Lin Sun took a deep breath and asked, "Your speculation is right. Those aristocratic families who once seized the property of Lin family really don't want to see you return to the Forbidden City." The old man said, "Because you're the son of Lin Wenjing and Luo Qingxuan, and your grandfather was the patriarch of Lin family at that time. So when your father and grandfather died, you were the most qualified heir to take over the Lin family." Lin Sun looked calm, and his black eyes were emotionless. He said, "They should not be afraid of my identity. After all, it should be easy for them to kill me." A touch of appreciation flashed in the eyes of the old man. He didn't expect that Lin Sun could not only keep calm at such a moment, but also find the key to the problem in an instant. This was not something that just anyone could do. Yes, some people don't want you to return to the Forbidden City, and there are naturally some people who want you to return. Those forces like Chi family are really afraid of those who want you to return. The old man's words seemed a little awkward, but Lin Sun understood at once. In the final analysis, all this seemed to be related to him, but in fact there were two different forces fighting behind him. Chi family represented the forces that opposed his return to the Forbidden City, and the other force that wanted him to return. Who would it be? The old man soon revealed the answer. That force is from the Imperial Royal family. The Imperial Royal family. Lin Sun was shocked. How could this matter be related to the royal family? Just this title alone represented a kind of supreme authority and status in the empire. As for who it is, I can't tell you yet. The old man looked a little strange. You only need to know that it is because of a big shot in the imperial family that you have the opportunity to return to the Forbidden City. Why didn't you tell me? Lin Sun was in a daze. A wisp of helplessness appeared on the corners of the old man's mouth. Because even the young miss and I aren't sure exactly which great figure in the imperial family is. After some thought, the old man continued, "Perhaps when the time is right, that person will naturally take the initiative to tell you everything. Even Heiyao Shrine couldn't find out who the big shot was, which was too mysterious. I've told you most of what I know. As for the rest, you'll have to figure it out yourself. After all, this storm was caused by you. So only you have the chance to come into contact with more of the truth." After saying that, the old man felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Lin Sun took a deep breath and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Senior." From a moment he left Donglin town, he was arranged by the old man to enter the bloodthirsty camp for cultivation. Then, under the care of Shu Jin, he won the first place in the province test in Mist City. Until he came to the Forbidden City this time, the old man and the Heiyao Shrine behind him also gave him a lot of help and intelligence. Now, the old man even told him what happened in those years and uncovered the mystery of his life for him. Lin Sun was touched by such great kindness. He knew that if he explored by himself, it would be impossible to get all this so easily. Look, the Forbidden City is in the distance. At this time, the old man suddenly straightened his back and looked into the distance. Lin Sun suddenly woke up from his chaotic thoughts and looked up. He couldn't help narrowing his eyes in shock. On the land far away, there was a towering ancient city, which seemed to be boundless, standing between heaven and earth. The rolling purple air was steaming over the city. In the twilight, the whole city was dyed with a layer of magnificent and sacred purple gold color. It was magnificent and magnificent, like a miracle that had existed since ancient times. Just looking at the glorious scene would shock people's hearts. At this time, the old man had slowly descended with Lin Sun and soon came to the ground. When he looked at the forbidden city in the distance again, the scene was different. The city was like a mountain with red walls and golden tiles. The city gate alone was more than 300 meters high, which was majestic and majestic. Even further, it was a dense mass of numerous mountains that floated in midair. All of them were coiled with multicolored light, and they were gorgeous and resplendent. On the mountains, there were all kinds of ancient buildings with different styles. Some were rough and magnificent, some were magnificent, some were antique, and some were beautiful. Looking from a distance, there were no less than 100 mountains suspended in the air. It was hard to imagine how there could be so many mountains suspended in a city, and there were rows of buildings on them. The buildings were like cities in the air. Later, Lin Sun knew that those floating mountains were the places where the 7 top aristocratic families and many middle aristocratic families in the Forbidden City were located. People called it the Mountains of Aristocratic Families. Only aristocratic families and clans could occupy one of these mountains and build it into a base for their clans. This was the privilege of aristocratic families and also a kind of glory in the eyes of the world, representing monstrous power and status. However, there were a total of 72 mountains of aristocratic families, so those who could occupy one of the mountains were certainly the best of the aristocratic families. For example, these 72 mountains of clans had already been completely occupied by the 7 great high-grade clans and numerous mid-grade clans with deep resources and reserves. Not to mention, not a single low-grade clan could be found. Even many mid-grade clans didn't have a place within these mountains. When they arrived at the gate of the Forbidden City, it was already dark. There was a black chariot parked here, which seemed to have been waiting there for a long time. When the old man arrived with Lin Sun, he went straight to the chariot. Then, the driver handed in a sealed letter. Hey, it's so fast. There were 2 letters in the letter. When he opened the first one, the old man couldn't help being a little surprised. Then he smiled and said to Lin Sun, Chi Songfeng has been confined. He can't step out of Chi family in 3 years. Lin Sun nodded. He knew that Chi Songfeng had broken the agreement of those big shots by dealing with him with the cultivation of Sea Spirit Realm, so he suffered such a punishment. However, in Lin Sun's view, it was better to say that it was a kind of admonition than a punishment. It was meaningless for Chi Songfeng to be confined in his own clan. At this time, the old man opened the second letter. When he saw the content clearly, he fell into a long meditation. Lin Sun couldn't help asking, Senior, is it related to me? The old man nodded, and a strange look flashed across his face. You guessed it right. This letter is for you. As he said, he handed the letter to Lin Sun. The letter was made of an extremely rare golden jade paper, which was printed with a cluster of flame-like Ziyao flower logo. The Imperial Royal Family. When Lin Sun saw this logo, he was shocked. On the currency of the Empire, whether it was copper, silver, or gold coins, there were 3 completely different patterns engraved on the front. A green deer standing in air with its head raised represented the Imperial Green Deer School. A deliberately overflowing holy sword represented the Imperial Army, and a cluster of flame-like Ziyao flower represented the Imperial family. Therefore, at the first sight of this letter, Lin Sun had made a judgment that this letter came from the Imperial family. Looking at the letter again, there was only one line of words. When you enter the Forbidden City, you can turn the world upside down. But if you want to see me, you have to bear the responsibility of being the heir of Lin family first. Otherwise, you can leave the Forbidden City immediately, and I promise you that you will live a carefree life. Looking at this line of ancient and meaningful handwriting, Lin Sun clenched his hands quietly. He knew that the owner of the letter must be the big shot in the Imperial family. This letter was also a kind of test. If he entered the Forbidden City, he must bear the responsibility of being the heir of Lin family. If he didn't enter, although he could live a carefree life, he could never think about revenge for the rest of his life. It was up to Lin Sun to decide whether to enter or not. Next to him, the old man looked at Lin Sun quietly, as if waiting for his decision. To his surprise, Lin Sun tore the letter in his hand almost without thinking and said calmly, I'm already here. Even God can't let me leave now. Speaking of this, he smiled. Of course, I also want to see what kind of confidence the big shot has that he dares to say that he can turn the world upside down in the Forbidden City. Knowing that Lin Sun had made a choice, the old man couldn't help saying, "In fact, since there is no letter, I will also ask you what arrangements you will make after entering the Forbidden City. But obviously, I don't need to ask more." Lin Sun was stunned and said, "Senior, you and the big shot in the Imperial Palace." The old man seemed to know what Lin Sun was going to say and said, "Neither an enemy nor a friend." Lin Sun was thoughtful. Soon, the chariot started and drove into the Forbidden City with the old man and Lin Sun in the dark. That night, the Forbidden City was calm and tranquil without any disturbances. But many top forces knew that the surviving child of the Lin family returned to the Forbidden City tonight. Some people were nervous, some frowned, and some didn't take it seriously. No matter how powerful the Lin family was, it had completely fallen apart now. What's more, he was just a teenager. How big a wave could he set off in the Forbidden City? Chapter 3:27. The night was like water. The chariot carried Lin Sun and the old man all the way through the bustling and spacious streets towards the depths of the Forbidden City. What are you going to do? As the heir of Lin family, I will take the responsibility. It's not a good way to go. I see. In the chariot, Lin Sun and the old man exchanged questions and answers. I want to remind you that Heiyao Shrine, Miss, and I will not help you, because this is the business of your Lin family. You should understand the seriousness of it. The old man thought for a long time and finally said. Lin Sun seemed to have expected this and said, "I see." The old man changed the thread of conversation with an unfathomable smile on his lips. "Of course, many people in the Forbidden City mistakenly think that you have a lot to do with Heiyao Shrine. In this case, it's okay to let them continue to misunderstand." Lin Sun was stunned and felt warm in his heart. The old man was telling him that although he couldn't help him, he could act with the power of Heiyao Shrine. This promise alone was enough for Lin Sun to solve many difficult problems. Anyone who wanted to hurt Lin Sun in the future had to weigh the power of Heiyao Shrine, although it was no different from scaring people with the skin of a tiger. But sometimes, this kind of power could play a key role. What's more, Lin Sun didn't think that Heiyao Shrine would really let him run his own course. Otherwise, the old man wouldn't have helped him so many times in the past 2 years. There must be a reason for this. Lin Sun also thought that it might be related to Xia Ji, Master Lu, or his own life experience. But in any case, Lin Sun was very sure that he had many connections with Heiyao Shrine and they couldn't be separated. "Thank you, Senior." Lin Sun didn't know how many times he had thanked the old man, but he knew that he owed the old man too much. The old man smiled and looked as kind and gentle as before. Before long, the chariot stopped. When Lin Sun walked out of the chariot under the guidance of the old man, he couldn't help but be stunned. Not far away, there was a huge mountain floating. The mountain covered an area of hundreds of meters and was thousands of meters high. There were many ancient buildings standing on it. In the night, the whole mountain was suspended in the void of hundreds of meters high. It was covered with a layer of silver moonlight, looking majestic and holy. This was one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. As early as when he was outside the Forbidden City, Lin Sun had seen it from a distance. But now, when he looked up at it from a close distance, he found how magnificent the mountain was. This peak is called Heart Cleansing Peak. This is where your Lin clan resides. However, ever since the bloody incident that happened back then, the other members of the Lin clan have all moved away from this peak. Now, there is only an old servant guarding this place. The old man said gently. Lin Sun was shocked. He didn't expect that Lin family could occupy one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. From this, it could be inferred that the Lin family back then was at least a mid-level force. But as far as I know, once the aristocratic families on the mountain peak decline, their position on the Mountain of Aristocrats will be taken away. What's going on? Lin Sun could not help asking. It's complicated to say. It involves some past events of your Lin family. When you live in Heart Cleansing Peak, someone will tell you all about it. As the old man said, he suddenly stepped forward and waved his sleeves. A ray of light swept out and knocked on the bottom of heart-cleansing peak in the void of hundreds of meters. Lin Sun saw a spiritual formation at the bottom of heart-cleansing peak. Buzz, the ray of light knocked on the spiritual formation, producing a ripple-like fluctuation. The spiritual tattoos were rolling, which was extremely mysterious. Immediately, a voice came out of the spiritual formation. This is heart-cleansing peak, the place where Lin clan resides. I wonder which friend comes to visit. The old man whispered, Lin Wenjing's son is back. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, What? Please wait a moment, distinguished guest. The old man turned his head and explained, The mountain of aristocrats is like a forbidden place. If you don't report it, outsiders can't break into it. Lin Sun nodded. Before long, the spiritual formation at the bottom of heart-cleansing peak churned, and a door with spiritual light appeared. At the same time, a row of steps, like a rainbow, stretched down and connected with the ground. From a distance, it looked like a cloud ladder. A stooped old man came out of the door and walked down the steps. He first looked at the old man suspiciously, and then looked at Lin Sun. With merely a single glance, the hunched old man seemed as if he was struck by lightning, and he knelt on the ground with a thump as he cried out involuntarily. Master, over 10 years have passed, and this old servant thought that you'd passed away long ago. I never imagined that you're blessed by the heavens, and are still alive and well. Lin Sun was caught off guard and stunned. He is not Lin Wenjing, but Lin Wenjing's son. The old man explained. The old servant, who was crying bitterly, was stiff all over. He raised his head, wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, and looked at Lin Sun carefully. After a while, he said in a trance, No, he is younger than young Master. He is very similar to Master when he was young. With that, he suddenly got up and said excitedly, So you are really the son of Master? God has eyes. Master didn't cut off the rear. Ha ha ha! His lips trembled, and he burst into tears of joy. He was obviously out of control and seemed a little crazy, but his excitement, surprise couldn't be concealed. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun was inexplicably sad and said, Uncle, take me to the clan to have a look. At this moment, the old servant suddenly took a deep breath and bowed solemnly. Welcome home, young master. The etiquette was standard and meticulous. Lin Sun was stunned and looked at the old man next to him. The old man nodded with a smile. Go ahead, it's time for me to go back. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, Elder, thank you for this time. I will go to Heiyao Shrine in person to thank you later. The old man waved his hand and floated away. Young master, please. The old servant stretched out his hand and made a gesture of please. Lin Sun nodded, took a deep breath, and went up the steps. Heart-cleansing peak. This was the place where Lin clan was located. It was also the place where his father and mother once lived. After nearly 15 years, he finally came back. After entering the gate, he had come to heart-cleansing peak. He saw a wide bluestone road of more than 30 meters, winding and winding to the top of the peak. On both sides of the road, there were ancient palaces that were arranged in picturesque disorder. There were also ancient pavilions and pavilions, luxuriant flowers and plants, and strong ancient trees. From time to time, he could see waterfalls, flowing springs, and lush bamboo forests. Under the moonlight at night, the scenery was picturesque, just like a fairyland. Young master, please. The old servant led the way in front. From the first sight of Lin Sun, he knew that there was no mistake, because Lin Sun was so similar to the young Lin Wenjing that it couldn't be disguised at all. Lin Sun looked around as he moved forward. The old servant said, You can call me Lin Zhong. When the master was born, I was sent by the patriarch to work for the master. Decades have passed. Lin Zhong sighed with emotion. How could Lin Sun call his name directly? He said, Granddad Zhong, don't call me young master. Just call me Lin Sun. Lin Zhong was stunned and shook his head. Young master, the family rules can't be changed. Lin Sun had no choice but to change the topic. Are you the only one left on heart-cleansing peak now? Lin Zhong's face suddenly became gloomy. Obviously, he thought of something sad. Seeing this, Lin Sun patted Lin Zhong on the shoulder and said, "Granddad Zhong, from now on, I will stay in heart-cleansing peak like you. There are many things I don't know yet. I hope you could tell me one by one." Lin Zhong was refreshed and nodded hard as if he had found the backbone. When he was about to reach the summit of the mountain, a burst of joyful singing and laughter came from afar. It was especially noisy and ear-piercing under the tranquil night. Lin Sun was stunned. He saw a magnificent and towering ancient building on the top of the mountain was brightly lit at this time. The noise came from it. Before, Lin Zhong had introduced that the hall standing on the top of the mountain was called Heart Cleansing Hall, which covered an area of tens of acres. Only the lineal relatives of the patriarch were qualified to live and practice here. But now, Heart Cleansing Hall was brightly lit and full of singing and laughter. Compared with the desolation of other places, it was extremely abrupt. Young master, these are the young masters and young ladies of other branches of our Lin family, gathering with their friends. I've stopped them before, but Lin Zhong hurriedly explained, but in the end he hesitated to speak, and his expression was downcast. They don't care at all, do they? Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. I remember that more than 10 years ago, other clansmen of Lin family had moved away from Heart Cleansing Peak. Why do those young masters and young ladies still come here? Lin Zhong smiled bitterly. Young master, you just came back. You don't know the situation, Lin Sun interrupted. Granddad Zhong, tell me first, are those young masters and young ladies qualified to enter Heart Cleansing Hall to drink and have fun? Lin Zhong answered without hesitation, of course not. Lin Sun smiled and said, that's good. Then he strode towards Heart Cleansing Hall. Just now, he had checked with his spiritual perception. There were about a dozen men and women in Heart Cleansing Hall. The men were pompous and indulged in drinking. The women were coquettish, which made the huge Heart Cleansing Hall a mess. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Lin Sun would have doubted whether he had come to a brothel full of whoremongers and prostitutes. In the past, all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. But now that he knew his life experience and stepped into the Forbidden City repeatedly, he was ready to bear everything when he came to Heart Cleansing Peak. So, of course, it was necessary for him to take care of this matter in front of him. Young master, what are you going to do? Lin Zhong was stunned for a moment. Then his face suddenly changed. He realized something and hurriedly chased up. Young master, don't. Boom. Lin Sun had already come to the door of Heart Cleansing Hall and kicked open the closed door without hesitation. Didn't the big shot in the depths of the palace say that he could turn the Forbidden City upside down as long as he entered? Chapter 328. Boom! The door of the hall was kicked open, and the cold wind poured in. The men and women who were drinking and having fun changed their expressions and stopped their actions. Obviously, they thought it was an enemy attack. The funny thing was that a man was lying on the voluptuous chest of a seductive woman, and he was so frightened by this scene that his entire body trembled, and he couldn't help but bite down harder, causing the woman to let out a sharp and shrill scream. Lin Sun glanced around and saw that the ground was in a mess and the smell of alcohol was everywhere. All the men and women were drunk and disorderly. The originally extremely magnificent and solemn hall was abruptly made into a mess. Lin Sun strode in calmly. At this time, when they saw that it was a thin teenager who broke the door, all the men and women were angry and scolded loudly. Boy, you're courting death. How dare you break into our heart-cleansing peak? Damn it, where did this madman come from? Lin Zhong, get over here. Do you want to die? How can you let people into heart-cleansing peak casually? Do you have any rules in your eyes? Lin Sun looked at them calmly, but Lin Zhong beside him was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He hurriedly explained, Young masters and young ladies, this is— Shut up, I don't want to listen to your explanation. A woman in red seemed to be extremely angry. She stood up and scolded Lin Sun. Bastard, this is Lin family. How can you be so rampant here? Kneel down and apologize. As she said, she raised her hand and slapped Lin Sun in the face. What was arrogance? This was it. With his status as a member of the Lin clan, he didn't care who you were. Since you dared to barge in, he would beat you up first. Crack. However, Before the red-clothed woman could approach him, Lin Sun had already slapped her, causing her to let out a shrill cry while her figure was blasted flying. She fell to the point she was in a daze. Her hair was disheveled, and her beautiful face was instantly swollen like a bun. Murder! Murder! The woman squatted on the ground and screamed like a shrew. You're courting death. A man slapped the table and stood up. With a clang, he pulled out his sword and chopped at Lin Sun's head. The strong wind was blowing in all directions. Instead of retreating, Lin Sun moved forward. His palms stretched out like lightning, firmly grasped the opponent's long sword, and then kicked the man in the abdomen. The man's body suddenly arched up as he was kicked into the air, and then he fiercely fell to the ground. He lay on the ground like a toad, and the pain caused his face to contort while his eyes rolled back, and he cried out miserably. All the people in the hall, who were cursing and shouting just now, were shocked by Lin Sun's straightforward and powerful means when they saw this scene. They were so scared that they trembled all over. Most of the drunkenness disappeared, and they became sober. Only then did they realize that something was wrong. They looked at Lin Sun with a touch of surprise and fear in their eyes. Seeing their slow reaction, Lin Sun couldn't help but shake his head secretly. If the real enemies came in, they could kill all of them without any effort. What are you waiting for? Attack! The woman in red screamed. Her hair was disheveled, and her cheeks were red and swollen. It was obvious that she had lost her mind because of anger. All the people looked at each other, but they dared not move. Lin Sun looked very young, and he didn't say a word after entering the hall. But his means of fighting were extremely powerful and frightening. Lin Sun smiled and walked towards the woman in the red dress. What are you going to do? The woman in red screamed. Although Lin Sun was smiling, she felt an indescribable fear. Granddad Zhong, who is this lady? Lin Sun didn't take action, but asked softly. Young master, according to the ranking of the family, she is your cousin, Lin Yujiao. Lin Zhong in the distance said quickly, Young master? Cousin? All the people in the hall were confused. Was this guy also a member of Lin family? But why had they never seen him before? Oh, it turns out to be my cousin. Lin Sun smiled and stared at the woman in red, Lin Yujiao, with his deep black eyes. He said softly, Do you know the rules of the family? Lin Yujiao was also a little confused at this time. She said, Of course, as a member of Lin family, how can I not know the rules of the family? Lin Sun said thoughtfully, So, you're not confused. In this case, it's easy to deal with. As he said, he stretched out his hand and grabbed Lin Yujiao, like picking up a chick. Then he exerted strength in his arms and threw her gently. Everyone was shocked to see that Lin Yujiao's body drew a beautiful arc and was thrown out of the hall with a loud scream. This made them all tremble. They didn't expect that Lin Sun would take action without saying a word. Bastard, I'll kill you, kill you. Outside the hall, Lin Yujiao's shrill scream came. Whether you want to kill me or not, you'd better kneel outside the hall and wait for punishment. Otherwise, I don't mind taking your life to make a demonstration to others. Lin Sun's voice was still as calm as before, but there was a terrible momentum around him. It seemed that in an instant, he had become another person. His eyebrows were as sharp as a knife, and his eyes were as black as lightning. As he stood there casually, there was a kind of power that could turn into a storm and sweep away the mountains and rivers. In an instant, the atmosphere in the hall fell into a dead silence. Everyone felt a chill in their heart and suffocated for a while, feeling a great terror. Especially Lin Yujiao outside the hall. She was so angry that she almost went crazy. But when she was locked by Lin Sun's terrible momentum, she felt a fatal danger, as if a basin of ice water had been poured on her. Her pretty face turned pale, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Then she knelt down. Lin Sun directly told her that if she dared to hesitate, the boy who suddenly appeared would definitely kill her at the first time. How could Lin Sun's momentum, which had been honed by killing mountains of corpses and seas of blood, be ordinary? Not to mention these frivolous and pompous young masters and ladies in the hall. Even those practitioners who were proficient in combat would be shocked by Lin Sun's momentum. At this time, Lin Zhong, standing on one side of the hall, couldn't help but be in a trance. Only then did he realize that the young master, whose spiritual vein had been dug out by the enemy more than 10 years ago, was not reduced to a useless person. On the contrary, he already had extraordinary power. There was a dead silence in the hall. Everyone was shocked by Lin Sun's momentum. Those who are not from Lin clan stand out first. Lin Sun glanced at those men and women and said indifferently. At the moment, 5 or 6 coquettish women stood out. All of them looked pale and shivered. They lowered their heads and dared not look directly at Lin Sun. "Who are they?" Lin Sun asked. Lin Zhong's face flashed with embarrassment. He hesitated and said, "Young master, they are prostitutes." Lin Sun waved his hand and said, "Granddad Zhong, send them away. By the way, give them the remuneration they deserve." "Yes." Lin Zhong nodded quickly. At this time, a delicate-looking man full of rouge stood out in panic and said in a low voice, I'm not from Lin clan either." Lin Sun was stunned. This man was too effeminate. Not only did he look like a woman, but also his temperament was no different from that of a woman. Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. Could this man be the legendary gigolo? "Young master, this is Showen's boy toy," Lin Zhong explained in a low voice. Lin Sun immediately noticed that a man in a luxurious robe in the hall became unnatural. Obviously, he was the so-called Showen. "Take him away." Lin Sun waved his hand, yet he sighed in his heart. These were the disciples of the Lin clan that he'd seen tonight. All of them indulged in debauchery and indulged in drinking. Not only did they fool around with the women in the brothel, they even played with male pets. Soon, Lin Zhong left with those prostitutes and boy toys. There were only 4 men and 2 women left in the hall, as well as Lin Yujiao kneeling outside the hall. Lin Sun stood in the center of the hall without saying a word, which made the atmosphere more and more dull. All the men and women were almost out of breath. "You also kneel outside the hall and wait for punishment." Finally, Lin Sun seemed to make a decision and said calmly. Suddenly, all the men and women's faces changed dramatically. It seemed that they couldn't believe their ears. "Don't go too far. This is Heart-Cleansing Peak, the territory of Lin clan. If you're known by the elders of the clan, you will definitely die." Someone couldn't help but shout, trying to put up a strong front while feeling weak inside. "Yes, what qualification do you have to punish us?" Others also shouted. Lin Sun smiled slightly. Why? Then he rushed forward in a flash. In just a moment, he suppressed all the men and women one by one and threw them out of the hall. They fell to the ground and screamed. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't hesitate at all. Although he was ruthless, he didn't kill them. Lin Sun didn't kill them because they were all members of Lin clan. Otherwise, he would have killed them as soon as he entered the hall. "Kneel down." When the 2 words fell into the ears of those screaming men and women, it was like a devil's declaration, which made them tremble and helpless. Who was this guy? How dared he treat them like this? Was he really not afraid of death? This was Heart-Cleansing Peak. It was the territory of Lin clan. But even if they were angry and afraid, when they saw Lin Sun's figure coming from the hall step by step, they were stiff all over, as if watching death coming to them. They all knelt down in a hurry. Lin Sun stopped and glanced at these Lin clansmen one by one. He was disappointed again. It was easy for these guys to kneel down. If there was a great enemy, these guys would not be useful at all. "My name is Lin Sun. From today on, I will take charge of Heart-Cleansing Peak." Lin Sun said calmly. "What?" As soon as this was said, all the men and women showed incredible expressions. What did this guy say? Did he say he would take over Heart-Cleansing Peak? Ridiculous. Even if Lin clan suffered a heavy loss and fell apart in those years, no force in the whole Forbidden City could touch Heart-Cleansing Peak. But now, a young man suddenly broke in and threatened to take over the territory of Lin clan. How could this not be ridiculous? If Lin Sun didn't look extremely serious when he spoke, they all doubted whether this guy was a lunatic. Chapter 329. Those men and women sneered in their hearts because of Lin Sun's power, but they didn't dare to say much. Lin Sun didn't need to guess what these guys were thinking, but he didn't want to explain more. What he said tonight was not for them at all. They were just a group of playboys. Lin Sun didn't want to prove his existence in front of them. He didn't want to spread the news that he took over heart-cleansing Peak through the mouths of these Lin family's disciples. Let all the other clansmen of Lin family know about it. Lin Sun would like to see how many people would jump out to oppose him at that time. Before long, Lin Zhong came back and saw the figures kneeling on the ground. He couldn't help but look worried, but he didn't say anything in the end. He had seen that this young master was not an impetuous person. He might do this to establish his prestige or have other profound meaning, but it was definitely not a reckless move. Tonight is the first time I step into heart-cleansing Peak. I won't embarrass you. I'll let you go now. However, if you want to come to heart-cleansing Peak in the future, you have to get my consent first. Lin Sun waved his hand and turned into the hall. Those men and women couldn't believe that Lin Sun would let them go so easily. Until they saw Lin Sun's figure disappear in the depths of heart-cleansing hall. They finally dared to be sure that it was true. Let's go. Those men and women got up and hurried away with hatred. They were going to tell the elders of their clan what happened tonight. How dare a 10-year-old brat threaten to take charge of heart-cleansing Peak? He must be tired of living. When they came to the bottom of heart-cleansing Peak, a man suddenly asked, Lin Zhong, who is that boy? As soon as this question came out, others suddenly reacted. Yes, they still didn't know the real identity of Lin Sun at this time. It was not their fault. Lin Sun didn't care about them before. He simply and rudely beat them, which made these men and women confused. How could they think about other things? Young masters and ladies, that is Lin Sun, the son of my master Lin Wenjing and his mother Luo Qingxuan. Lin Zhong said with a touch of pride. What? Lin Wenjing's son? Wasn't he dead when he was born? Lin Zhong, are you fucking kidding me? No wonder he looks familiar to me. I always feel that I have seen him somewhere. Those men and women were in an uproar, all of them shocked by this news. They continued to ask Lin Zhong and repeatedly confirmed that Lin Zhong was Lin Wenjing's son from beginning to end. This caused all of them to have a bad feeling in their hearts. If they planned to go back and complain to their elders in order to retaliate against Lin Sun, at this moment, they really realized that the situation was a little serious. He must report this matter to the elders of the clan immediately. Soon, those men and women left in a hurry. The hall was in a mess, and the air was still suffused with the pungent smell of alcohol. Sitting alone in a chair, Lin Sun's eyes wandered and his expression was blank, as if he had a lot on his mind. From the moment he found out about his past, he should have been happy, but the truth was that he couldn't feel happy at all. The events of the past were too complicated. In that bloody massacre, his father, Lin Wenjing, was killed, his mother, Luo Qingxuan, disappeared, and even none of their immediate relatives survived. The murderer was a person called Yin Qingbai. He only knew that he came from a mysterious orthodoxy called the Heavenly Sword Sect. In addition, there were no other clues. If that was all, it would be fine. But the reality was cruel. Because of this bloody incident, the leaderless Lin family fell into a situation of internal and external troubles. In the end, Lin family was taken advantage of by many top forces, and its forces and industries were divided up. Lin family completely declined and declined. Originally, all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun. But the moment he stepped into the Forbidden City, Lin Sun knew that as the son of Lin Wenjing, he had to bear some things whether he wanted to or not. It was easy to say, but when he really did it, he would find it difficult and complicated, which made Lin Sun feel that he didn't know where to start. He had never experienced such a thing. He suddenly became a lineal descendant of Lin family in the Forbidden City from a young boy who came out of the mine prison. And then he was qualified to take over Heart-Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. It was indeed difficult for Lin Sun to adapt to his new identity after such a change. It was like a beggar on the street was suddenly recognized as the emperor's own son one day. No one could adapt to the strong contrast quickly. Of course, Lin Sun's encounter was like a gorgeous counterattack for many poor people in the world. He didn't need to struggle at all. He suddenly became a lineal descendant of an aristocratic family. Who wouldn't envy him? No matter how much the Lin clan had declined, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Just the identity of a descendant of a great clan was not something that could be easily obtained. Luo Qingxuan was so outstanding that she won the first place in the nation test. But when she wanted to be with Lin Wenjing, she was unanimously opposed by all the clansmen of Lin family. Why? It was very simple. Because Luo Qingxuan was born at the bottom of the poor family, she was considered not qualified to be with Lin Wenjing. However, only Lin Sun himself knew how embarrassing and unbearable the situation of the heir of Lin family was, and there were countless dangers hidden in it. If possible, he would rather not be a member of Lin family. Glorious identity? Who knew how many enemies were staring at him in the dark? Rising to the sky in a single bound? What a joke. Those clansmen of Lin family would not allow him to take over heart-cleansing peaks smoothly. How could he rise to the sky in a single bound? It could be said that the dangers and difficulties Lin Sun, who was alone, had to face were absolutely beyond imagination if he wanted to bear the responsibility on his shoulders. If he was not careful, he might end up being smashed to pieces. The empty and desolate hall was a mess. A 15-year-old youth sat in a chair, lost in thought, deep in thought. When you enter the Forbidden City, you can turn the world upside down. In his mind, the letter with a cluster of Xiao flower and the line of words on the letter flashed inadvertently. Then he thought of the mysterious big shot in the palace. Inexplicably, Lin Sun's black eyes flashed with a glimmer of light. Now in the Forbidden City, many people mistakenly think that you have a lot to do with Heiyao Shrine. In this case, it's okay to let them continue to misunderstand. Soon, Lin Sun remembered the words of the old man of Heiyao Shrine, and a smile appeared on his lips inadvertently. No matter how dangerous it is, from today on, I will make a mess in front of you, Lin Sun murmured in his heart. The original confused and depressed mood had been replaced by a decisive and firm will. It didn't take long for the old servant Lin Zhong to return. Lin Sun invited him to sit down and said, "Granddad Zhong, tell me about the situation of Lin family." Lin Zhong seemed to have prepared for it. He was not surprised. After thinking for a while, he began to speak. Lin Sun knew that Lin family was also a superior aristocratic family in the Forbidden City of the Empire 500 years ago, which was on par with the well-known 7 superior aristocratic families. The criterion to judge an aristocratic family was very simple. There was only one thing, that was whether there was a life-death realm king in the family. At that time, an ancestor of Lin family named Lin Daochen was a famous life-death realm king in the empire. But later, Lin Daochen unfortunately died in the battlefield and was defeated by a terrible king in the Empire of the Dark. Since then, Lin family suffered a great loss of vitality and fell from the ranks of superior aristocratic families to the ranks of medium aristocratic families. The most embarrassing thing was that there had been no life-death realm king in hundreds of years. But even so, the power possessed by Lin family was not comparable to that of ordinary medium aristocratic families. It could be regarded as a top force, second only to the 7 superior aristocratic families. This situation lasted for hundreds of years, but it was peaceful. Although the power of Lin family did not return to the ranks of superior aristocratic families, it did not decline again, until the bloody event that happened in Lin family 15 years ago, which completely changed the power of Lin family. Almost all the immediate relatives of Lin fighting, the patriarch, were killed. Without a leader, the power of Lin family was mercilessly divided by many powerful families and fell to the bottom. Now, the power owned by Lin family could barely be classified as inferior aristocratic families, not even medium aristocratic families. Hearing this, Lin Sun could not help but feel disappointed. 500 years ago, Lin family was still a superior aristocratic family with great power and a life-death realm king. 500 years later, it had declined to the point where it could barely be classified as an inferior aristocratic family. It could be said that it had plummeted and lost its glory. Compared with the other 7 aristocratic families, Lin family indeed fell too fast. Soon, Lin Sun calmed down and asked, "Granddad Zhong, what's the situation of Lin family now?" Lin Zhong's voice was low as he was immersed in his memories. His expression carried a wisp of sorrow as he said, "After the bloody incident all those years ago, the patriarch's bloodline was almost completely annihilated, and only the other 4 collateral branches were left. It turned out that there were 5 branches of Lin family. Among them, the branch of Lin fighting, Lin Sun's grandfather, was the direct descendant and had always firmly controlled the power of the family. In addition, the other 4 branches were the descendants of Lin Fighting's 4 younger brothers, as well as many in-laws and distant relatives. This was what a large clan was like. They had many relatives, direct relatives, collateral relatives, in-laws, and so on. There were countless of them. After the bloody incident, the 4 branches of Lin family moved away from Heart-Cleansing Peak and settled in other areas of the Forbidden City. Nominally, they were still members of Lin family, but in fact they had been completely divided into 4 forces, each of which did its own thing. Hearing this, Lin Sun frowned. He keenly grasped a key problem and said, "In those days, the 4 branches did not hesitate to cooperate with the enemy to divide the foundation of Lin family in order to fight for power and profit. How could people like them be willing to move away from Heart-Cleansing Peak?" Heart-Cleansing Peak. This was one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic families, which represented the supreme glory and status of an aristocratic family. Who would be willing to give up such a treasure land and look for a new place to settle? Chapter 330. Lin Zhong said proudly, "Young master, apart from you, no one else in Lin family is qualified to occupy Heart-Cleansing Peak." Soon, Lin Sun understood that this was the special care from the imperial family. Hundreds of years ago, Lin Daochun, the ancestor of Lin family, fought for the empire. Although he died in the end, he helped the empire to resolve a terrible disaster. Therefore, the imperial family personally issued the emperor's decree and granted the ownership of Heart-Cleansing Peak to the lineal descendants of Lin Daochun. Lin Fighting, Lin Daochun's grandfather, was the eldest son of Lin Daochun, and his father, Lin Wenjing, was the eldest grandson of Lin Daochun. In terms of seniority, Lin Sun was the lineal great-grandson of Lin Daochun. In a bloody event more than 10 years ago, almost all the lineal descendants of Lin Daochun were killed. Therefore, according to the decree of that year, Lin Sun became the only qualified candidate to own Heart-Cleansing Peak. As for other branches of Lin family, they had to move out of Heart-Cleansing Peak even if they didn't want to because they didn't have such qualifications. According to common sense, almost all the lineal descendants of Lin Daochun had died. Even Lin Sun, a baby in swaddling clothes, was considered impossible to survive. Heart-Cleansing Peak should be taken away. It was strange that the imperial family didn't make this decision, so Heart-Cleansing Peak had not been taken away to this day. Did they know that I didn't die? Lin Sun was surprised. Lin Zhong had been guarding Heart-Cleansing Peak for years. He was also very confused. Hearing Lin Sun's question, he couldn't help but say, "It's possible. In these years, I often worry that Heart-Cleansing Peak will be taken away suddenly. But until you come back today, such a thing has never happened. In this way, the imperial family seems to have expected that you will return one day." Lin Sun suddenly thought of the big shot in the depths of the imperial palace. Could it be him? Soon, Lin Sun shook his head. This problem was not important at present. What was important was that Heart-Cleansing Peak still belonged to Lin family, which was enough. "Granddad Zhong, I want to ask you something." Lin Sun's expression became solemn. Lin Zhong immediately sat up straight and said, "Young master, feel free to speak your mind. This old servant will definitely tell you everything I know without reserve." Lin Sun leaned forward slightly and stared at Lin Zhong with deep black eyes. "If I want to restore Lin family, where do you think I should start?" Lin Zhong was shocked in his heart. He seemed to be a little excited, but he soon calmed down and said bitterly, "Young master, there are only you and me on Heart-Cleansing Peak now. It's almost impossible to do this." He knew the current situation of Lin family better than Lin Sun. Even if Lin Sun was the only descendant who was qualified to inherit Heart-Cleansing Peak, he was too young. He was only in his teens, and he was alone. How could he restore Lin family? Lin family and Lin family. And the other four branches of family, Lin family, they were not from Lin family. On the contrary, Lin Zhong was even sure that when those clansmen learned that Lin Sun wanted to take charge of heart-cleansing Peak and sit on the throne of Patriarch, they would not give up. He knew those collateral family members too well. After the bloody incident that year, in order to fight for power, they didn't hesitate to collude with foreign enemies, causing the Lin family to sink into internal strife. The influence and property that the Lin family originally possessed were also completely divided up. How could such clansmen watch Lin Sun take charge of heart-cleansing Peak? What's more, many powerful forces who divided up Lin family's industry in those days would not watch Lin Sun grow. Internal troubles. Foreign troubles. In addition, Lin Sun was young, alone, and weak. It was more difficult for him to lead the whole Lin family than to ascend to heaven. In an instant, Lin Sun knew that Lin Zhong didn't want to hit him, but thought that he didn't have the ability to take charge of Lin family at present. This made Lin Sun frown and remain silent. He knew very well that he was currently short of manpower, money, and strong capital to be able to stand on his own. It was indeed difficult to restore the Lin family. However, since he came back, how could he be indifferent? He was not afraid of difficulties, but he was afraid of admitting defeat. Now Lin family was declining. The situation was dangerous, and the situation was unbearable. As long as he did it step by step, there would be hope to reverse the situation and rise again. If he didn't do it, he might as well get out of the Forbidden City at once. Of course, according to Lin Sun's character, he would not admit defeat. Granddad Zhong, whether you believe it or not, tell me what to do first. If I do it, I may lose, but if I don't do it, I will regret it for the rest of my life. Lin Sun's eyes were firm. Lin Zhong's expression changed. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Well, I've been struggling at death's door for more than 10 years. If I didn't want heart-cleansing Peak left by the Patriarch to be occupied by others, I would have died long ago. Since young master wants to take a gamble, then this old servant will go all out with these old bones of mine and fight it out with you." His voice was sonorous. Lin Sun immediately smiled and patted Lin Zhong on the shoulder, saying, "Don't worry, Granddad Zhong. Although I'm alone, I haven't met any problem that I can't solve. Young master, the first thing you need to do now is to have a comprehensive understanding of the current situation of our Lin family. Only by solving the internal problems can we gather the strength of the clan to fight against the foreign enemies." This was Lin Zhong's suggestion. Lin Sun thought for a while and nodded secretly. What he said was true. It was true that he had encountered a lot of problems when he just entered the Forbidden City, but the real problem was to solve the internal problems of the clan first. As long as he solved the internal problems, he would stabilize his foundation and stand firm. If he wanted to avenge his parents and relatives without a stable foundation, it would be wishful thinking. In order to further understand the current situation of Lin family, Lin Zhong left Heart Cleansing Hall with Lin Sun. Back mountain of Heart Cleansing Peak. Sutras Pavilion. The 7-story ancient building was bathed in silver starlight. This was a place where Lin family stored ancient books. It was the core forbidden area of the clan. In the 7-story building, Lin family collected thousands of years of cultivation methods. At that time, Lin family was one of the top aristocratic families with great power. It could be imagined how amazing the ancient books it inherited were. The scripture pavilion could also show how powerful a clan's foundation was. But when Lin Sun entered under the leadership of Lin Zhong, he found that rows of bookshelves were scattered on the ground, covered with cobwebs and dust. It was like being ransacked by a group of robbers. Not to mention the ancient books, even a piece of paper could not be found. Young master, the Sutras Pavilion is divided into 7 floors. It was built by the ancestors of Lin family with painstaking efforts. The ancient books collected here were as vast as the sea. Lin Zhong's voice was low, and he glanced at the empty hall covered with cobwebs and dust with a complicated look. There are more than 3,000 ancient books on cultivation and more than 1,900 secret fighting skills on the first floor alone. But after the bloody incident back then, These priceless books were all taken away. Lin Zhong's voice was bitter, full of loneliness and sadness. Lin Sun glanced around for a long time in a daze. He didn't speak, but clenched his hands unconsciously. Then Lin Zhong led Lin Sun to the second floor of the Sutras Pavilion. Young master, there are 1,600 ancient books on cultivation and more than 700 secret fighting skills on the second floor. On the second floor, rows of bookshelves also collapsed. Dust and cobwebs could be seen everywhere. In some places, there were still traces of fighting and bloodstains. It was a mess. Let's go to the third floor. Lin Sun stood silently for a long time. He took a deep breath and withdrew his gaze. Next, Lin Zhong led Lin Sun up floor by floor. Without exception, they were all empty and dilapidated. When they came to the top floor, Lin Zhong's expression became extremely lonely and sad. His emotions fluctuated violently, and he seemed to be about to collapse. There were only a few rows of bookshelves here, but this was the first-class forbidden area in the Sutras Pavilion. In those days, no one except the core members of Lin family was qualified to set foot here. Young master, what is hidden here are the most precious secret books of Lin family. There are 7 of them. In addition, there are 54 volumes of cultivation experience left by our ancestors. The real core inheritance is recorded in those books. When he finished this paragraph, Lin Zhong seemed to have lost all his strength and looked extremely gloomy. Lin Sun stood there, and he almost couldn't bear the boiling anger in his heart. In a trance, he seemed to see group after group of enemies from all those years ago, carrying boundless greed and ecstasy as they wantonly plundered the scripture depository. Those were the ancient books collected by the ancestors of Lin family with great efforts. They were the foundation of Lin family. But now they were all looted. Crack, crack. Lin Sun clenched his hands into fists. His knuckles made a crisp sound because of the force, and the blue veins on the back of his hands burst. However, Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. There seemed to be a vortex surging in the depths of his black eyes, burning with terrible flames. After a long time, Lin Sun suddenly withdrew his gaze and strode down the golden pavilion. He dared not to look at it anymore. He was worried that he couldn't control his anger. A cultivation treasure house built by the ancestors of Lin family was completely destroyed because of that bloody incident. Even an outsider would feel deeply sorry to see such a scene, let alone Lin Sun, a lineal descendant of Lin family. Granddad Zhong, do you know we're the ones who took these books back then? Yes. Good. Write them down for me one by one. Don't miss any. Young master, rest assured, I won't forget those murderers even if I die. Walking out of the Sutras Pavilion, Lin Sun took a deep breath and began to tell Lin Zhong something. Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of one thing and asked, were there clansmen of the other 4 branches who looted the Sutras Pavilion? Lin Zhong was stiff all over and his expression changed. There was no need to ask again. Lin Sun already knew the answer. His eyes suddenly became cold, but he chuckled and said, good, very good. That smile was colder and emotionless than his eyes. Chapter 331. Next, Lin Zhong led Lin Sun along the back mountain and came to another forbidden place of Lin family, Treasure House. The treasure house was divided into 5 layers. There were tens of thousands of spiritual weapons, ranging from the lowest level of human rank to the top of heaven rank. Among them were different weapons such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, hooks, and forks, as well as armors, shoulder guards, wrist guards, boots, heart protectors, and so on. There were even spiritual weapons such as short crossbows, artillery crossbows, warships, and so on. But now, this place was completely empty. When Lin Sun walked out of the treasure house, his face remained unchanged, but his whole body was full of terrible killing intent. He couldn't control it all. Think about it. How amazing the value of the spiritual treasures stored by a top force that once ranked among the top forces of the empire. But now all of them were looted. If Lin Sun's state of mind hadn't been as firm as a rock, he would have vomited blood and died of anger. If the ancestors of Lin family saw this scene, they would not rest in peace. After leaving the treasure house, Lin Sun was taken to the core forbidden places of Lin family, such as Pill Depository, Animal Pond, Spiritual Medicine Garden, and so on. In the end, without exception, all the valuable treasures within them were completely swept clean. In the end, when Lin Sun returned to Heart Cleansing Hall, he sat alone in complete silence, motionless like a sculpture, as if he had no emotion. Outside the window, the stars were shining and the moon was hanging high. It was extraordinarily quiet, but the young man, sitting alone in the hall, was in a turbulent state of mind. His emotions were turbulent and didn't calm down for a long time. He could predict that Lin family had declined to the extreme, but he didn't expect that such a big heart-cleansing peak would be looted like this. There were only a bunch of empty houses and furnishings left. There was nothing valuable. This was the situation Lin Sun was facing now. Lin Zhong stood on one side of the hall and looked at Lin Sun worriedly, lest Lin Sun couldn't bear the blow and collapse completely. It was reasonable that such a big heart-cleansing peak seemed to be one of the 72 peaks of aristocratic families. But who could imagine that this place, which represented supreme glory, was just an empty shell now? A quarter of an hour, half an hour, one incense stick's worth of time. As time went by, Lin Sun remained silent, which made Lin Zhong more and more worried. He suddenly regretted telling Lin Sun all this tonight. After all, the young master was only a teenager. He was still too young. How could he bear such a cruel blow when he suddenly found out that he was about to inherit such a mess? Young master, Lin Zhong took a deep breath and tried to comfort Lin. If you really can't do it, let's give up. As long as you're alive, it's more important than anything else. At this moment, Lin Sun, who was like a clay statue, finally reacted. He raised his head and looked at Lin Zhong. His lips curled into a smile that was hard to understand. He said softly, "Granddad Zhong, I can't go on anymore. If I give up now, it will be crueler than killing me." After a pause, he stood up and looked at the vast night outside the hall, saying, "When I entered the Forbidden City, someone told me that I could turn the world upside down. At that time, I wondered why he said that. Now I finally understand that if I don't make a scene, the Lin family will have no hope of coming back to life." At the end of his words, there was a touch of coldness in his voice. Lin Zhong was shocked. Looking at the young man in the distance, he suddenly felt inexplicable peace of mind, as if he saw the shadow of his master when he was young. In order to marry the mistress of the Lin family, his master was also resolute under the opposition of all the clansmen. Although there were thousands of people, he still went forward. Heart Cleansing Hall was very large and divided into 3 floors. The first floor was the hall for holding clan meetings. The second floor was the study room specially set up for the patriarch to deal with clan affairs. The third floor was the quiet room for the patriarch to practice. Before long, Lin Sun sat in front of the empty desk, playing with a crystal-clear purple jade seal in his hand. The jade seal was engraved with 2 words, "Heart Cleansing." It was made of some unknown material, and it was filled with a mysterious and obscure atmosphere. Heart Cleansing Jade Seal was the key to master Heart Cleansing Peak. Only by controlling it could the passage on Heart Cleansing Peak be opened. In other words, if Lin Sun didn't want to, as long as the passage was closed, no one could enter Heart Cleansing Peak unless he broke in by force. However, as one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats, anyone who wanted to break in by force had to think about the consequences. This thing was originally kept by Lin Zhong, but now it was given to Lin Sun, which meant that from now on, at least Lin Sun had the right to enter and exit Heart Cleansing Peak, regardless of the power of the clan. However, in Lin Sun's view, this thing couldn't play any role in solving his internal problems in the future. The key was to be strong himself. Thinking of this, Lin Sun put away Heart Cleansing Jade Pendant and took out a simple silver hairpin. This was given by Shu Sanqi, the chief instructor, when he left Bloodthirsty Camp. He told Lin Sun that if he had a chance to enter the Forbidden City, he could take this thing to a place called Vulture House when he was in trouble. The owner of Vulture House would help Lin Sun. Lin Sun didn't intend to accept it first, but Shu Sanqi's words changed his mind. Young Ku is also there. Don't you want to see your instructor again in the future? At this time, playing with the silver hairpin in his hand, Lin Sun thought of Instructor Young, who was delicate but cold as snow. The next morning, Lin Sun, who didn't sleep all night, got up and walked out of Heart Cleansing Hall. The rising sun was like a fantasy, sprinkling golden luster, dyeing the sea of clouds bright. The whole heart-cleansing peak was bathed in a sacred atmosphere. Looking from the top of the mountain, the golden morning light and purple clouds blended in the distance, which was magnificent and brilliant. The grand atmosphere between heaven and earth refreshed Lin Sun's spirit. This was Heart-Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the aristocratic family. It stood above the void of the Forbidden City, the capital of the empire. Only the most powerful aristocratic family of the empire could occupy this place and overlook the mountains and rivers. Young master, don't you need me to accompany you? No, Granddad Zhou. When I come back, please put the list of all the treasures that were plundered in advance in the study. Don't worry, young master. Lin Sun said goodbye to Lin Zhong and walked down Heart-Cleansing Peak alone. On the way to the bottom of the peak, there were many chariots pulled by snow-maned deer. But after the bloody things happened that year, even the snow-maned deer were taken away. Lin Sun always had an unspeakable hatred in his heart whenever he thought of this kind of looting. Buzz, at the bottom of the peak, with the opening of the spiritual formation, an invisible door emerged. A white jade staircase swept out like a rainbow and connected to the ground below the 300 meters. As soon as Lin Sun walked out, he stood there, because there were already people waiting there on the ground. It was a group of young people, men and women, all dressed in brocade and expensive clothes. At first glance, Lin Sun knew that they were not ordinary children. Obviously, they had been waiting here for a long time. At this time, they all looked impatient and were cursing something. When they saw Lin Sun, they were all refreshed and looked at Lin Sun. When they saw that Lin Sun was just a teenager, someone immediately made a disdainful sound. Lin Wenxiu, is this young boy the fierce man you said? Tut tut. I didn't expect that you were defeated by him. Yu Jiao, don't be angry. No matter who he is, since he dared to beat you, I must cut off one of his arms. Lin Sun noticed that in the crowd, there were several young people he met last night. At this time, they all looked at him with resentment. Did they come to seek revenge? When this idea flashed through his mind, Lin Sun denied it because he saw that although those young people shouted fiercely, no one dared to fight. It was not because they were afraid of him, but because of a man in yellow in front of them. The man was tall, with sword-like eyebrows and sharp eyes. He stood there casually with a kind of arrogant and oppressive momentum. Heaven Gang Realm. In an instant, Lin Sun judged the strength of the man from his breath. It was generally clear that the man in yellow should be an outstanding child of collateral branch of Lin family. Yu Jiao, is he the Lin Sun you mentioned? The man in yellow stared at Lin Sun coldly. Although his voice was calm, his momentum was aggressive. Cousin Ingjin, it's him. Lin Yu Jiao clenched her teeth, and her eyes were full of resentment. Her pretty face was still red and swollen and covered by a piece of gauze, but the bruises at the corners of her eyes could not be covered. I see. You can go back now. The man in yellow gave an order and strode forward to the bottom of the white jade stairs. He looked up at Lin Sun at the end of the stairs. I'm Lin Ingjin from West Brooklyn. I heard that you threatened to occupy Heart-Cleansing Peak. Lin Ingjin, West Brooklyn. In an instant, Lin Sun remembered Lin Zhong's words last night. It turned out that after the 4 collateral branches of Lin family moved out, they were divided into 4 branches, namely Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, Flying Peak Lin, and Northlight Lin. Each of them was entrenched in different areas of the Forbidden City, just like 4 independent Lin clans. The relationship between them was complicated. Some of them hated each other, but also cooperated with each other. All of this was caused by the internal strife within the clan after the bloody incident all those years ago. Lin Ingjin came from Westbrook Lin, which meant that he was the descendant of Lin Sun's second grandfather, Lin Cece. However, Lin Sun didn't want to recognize his relatives at all. Seeing that the man was looking for trouble, he didn't bother to be polite. You're wrong. Lin Sun smiled and said, it's not a threat to occupy Heart-Cleansing Peak, but a fact. From now on, No cat or dog can enter and exit heart-cleansing peak at will. A cat or dog. Hearing this, many young people's faces changed, and they cursed one after another. This guy was so rampant and reckless. Linningen's face also sank. He waved his hand to stop people scolding. He stared at Lin's son like a knife. You're so arrogant. I don't know why you dare to say that, but I still have to advise you not to make mistakes. Heart-cleansing peak is not qualified for you. Chapter 332. Seeing that Linningen was so powerful, the young people who followed him were all excited. Linningen was one of the best in the younger generation of Westbrook Lins. When he broke through to human gang realm, he condensed the second-class pond of spiritual power, swamp of wind and earth. This made his cultivation speed far faster than ordinary people. As early as 3 years ago, he had broken through to Heaven Gang realm. It was said that Linningen already had the foundation to break through to Sea Spirit realm. The reason why he suppressed his realm was that he could lay a solid foundation for cultivation when he broke through in the future, so that he could have a longer road of cultivation. For practitioners in the world, it was a great problem whether they could step into Sea Spirit realm or not. But for Linningen, it was obviously not a problem. In short, in the hearts of people, Linningen was the pride of the younger generation of Westbrook Lins, with outstanding talent and outstanding strength. Now, he showed up with a domineering attitude. How could those young people not be excited? Some people even worried that Lin's son would be scared by Linningen's tough attitude. If he took the initiative to admit defeat, it would be too disappointing. Lin's son said with a smile, "Cut the crap. Since you're here to pick a fight, it proves that you're ready to be beaten. Then don't be polite and come at me. After I get rid of you, I have to hurry to do something. I don't have much time to waste with you." His words were casual, but those young people couldn't believe their ears. They all opened their eyes wide. This guy was so damn arrogant. Brotheringen beat him. Damn it, this guy's mouth is so poisonous. We must kill him. You are so reckless. Trouble comes from a loose tongue. Those young people shouted angrily. Linningen was also slightly stunned. He had seen arrogant people, but he had never seen such an arrogant one. He couldn't help but look gloomy, and his eyes burst with sharp and frightening light. "My friend, based on your words, today, you are so long-winded." Linsun rolled his eyes and frowned. "Are you a woman?" "You." Linningen was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. As a descendant of an aristocratic family, the most important thing was etiquette and demeanor. But he had never seen such an unforgiving person like Lin's son. Clang! But at this time, Lin's son seemed to have lost his patience. He pulled out his flowing lightsaber and chopped down from the white jade steps. He didn't hesitate at all when he made his move. This is too much. Linningen was completely angry. His whole body surged with terrible momentum. He was like an unsheathed sword, and his killing intent soared to the sky. In his hand, a spiritual sword swept out with a touch of burning red luster. But at the moment when Lin Sun attacked, Linningen's eyes suddenly narrowed. Lin Sun's simple saber seemed to be nothing special, but it made him feel that it was unstoppable and unavoidable. What kind of saber technique was this? Linningen was shocked and suddenly felt that something was wrong. There was an unparalleled momentum in the saber light, which was like a raging storm that could tear everything in the universe. This, Linningen was horrified. The anger and contempt in his heart all disappeared and were replaced by a deadly cold and dangerous atmosphere. At this critical moment, he almost subconsciously exerted all his strength, not to attack, but to defend. This scene seemed a little strange in the eyes of those young people. They thought that Linningen could easily kill Lin Sun with one sword strike. But they never thought that Linningen's sword strike was used to defend his whole body. Defense? How could it be possible to defend before the fight started? Everyone was stunned. Immediately after, their vision blurred, and they heard a loud bang. Spiritual light shot out, and the force wreaked havoc. It was as if two mountains had collided. Then, Linningen, who was highly respected by them, flew out like a kite with a broken line, as if he was hit by a wild ox. With a puff, the smoke and dust on the ground scattered. Liningen screamed and coughed up blood. Many bones in his body were broken. He was in so much pain that he couldn't stand up. Hiss! All the people present gasped and were dumbfounded. Did they see it wrong? Just at the beginning of the fight, Liningen was sent out by a saber strike. It was horrible. This was beyond everyone's imagination. They couldn't help being stunned and completely shocked. But Lin Sun was also a little surprised at this time. You have a good reaction. You were lucky to be able to block my strike. Hearing this, many people shivered all over and looked horrified. They finally realized that the handsome young man in front of them was a tough guy. With the cultivation of Earth Gang Realm, he killed Liningen, who was in Heaven Gang Realm, with one strike. And it was obvious that he was very relaxed and didn't use his full strength at all. This was too appalling. Liningen's face was livid. He was lying on the ground and coughing up blood. His eyes were full of disbelief. He couldn't imagine how he was defeated so quickly. At this time, Lin Sun had already walked down the steps. Wherever he passed, those young people were scared to avoid him, as if they were avoiding snakes and scorpions. Obviously, they were frightened by Lin Sun's strike just now. Lin Sun walked to Liningen and quickly took all the valuable things from Liningen's body, including the jade belt, boots, and inner armor. Liningen kept screaming in horror, like a virgin girl being ravaged. His face was full of helplessness. In the blink of an eye, Liningen had only a pair of underpants left, revealing his white, naked body. He was clean all over. The group of young people were stunned. It was not that they didn't want to help him, but Lin Sun moved so fast that Liningen was about to become a naked man when they reacted. The most important thing was that even Liningen had no resistance under Lin Sun's hands. If it was them, it was like hitting a stone with an egg. After taking all the valuable things, Lin Sun stopped. He ignored Liningen, who was lying on the ground, covering his face and screaming. Lin Sun looked at the group of young people. Just a glance made those young people feel cold all over, as if they were stared at by a hungry wolf. The men's faces changed, and the women's faces turned pale. They were afraid to repeat Liningen's mistakes. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh in his heart. These guys were really cowards. They didn't know how to fight back, so that Lin Sun couldn't find a chance to plunder some treasures. Everyone, go back and tell your elders that it's useless to test me. I won't care about you this time, but if you dare to provoke me next time, don't blame me for being rude. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd, showed a warm smile, and turned away. Of course, he knew that this was a test. Obviously, he wanted Liningen to feel his trump card. This proved that the 4 branches of Lin family should now know that he was back. Maybe they heard some news, so they didn't dare to come rashly, so they sent Liningen to test him. Unfortunately, Lin Sun didn't welcome this kind of test at all. Even in his opinion, this kind of test undoubtedly proved that the 4 branches didn't put him in their eyes at all. Liningen's miserable end was Lin Sun's counterattack. He was so unceremonious and powerful that he wanted to let the 4 branches know that Lin Sun was determined to control Heart-Cleansing Peak. Watching Lin Sun leave, those young people couldn't help changing their expressions. No one dared to stop him. They even secretly felt lucky that Lin Sun didn't make trouble for them. What happened just now was too frightening. Lin Sun not only defeated Liningen with one saber, but also stripped Liningen from head to toe, leaving only a colorful underpants. It was too humiliating. From now on, Liningen would become a laughing stock of Westbrook Lin. If he wanted to raise his head, he had to kill Lin Sun. Damn it! Damn it! At this time, Liningen was so ashamed and angry that he wanted to die. He roared again and again. It was so shameful and shameful. What Lin Sun did was even worse than killing him. He was so angry that he rolled his eyes and fainted. Seeing this, those young people immediately rushed to Lin Sun without thinking much. After solving Liningen's provocation, Lin Sun didn't care about it anymore. He walked along the spacious street into the Forbidden City in the morning. Yesterday, he arrived at the Forbidden City at night. He took the chariot all the way and entered Heart-Cleansing Peak before he had time to appreciate the scenery of the Forbidden City. But now, as he walked alone and strolled along the street, he saw the orderly and spacious streets were crowded with people and carriages. Most of them were cultivators, and it was rare to see ordinary people. This was normal. This was the Forbidden City, an important place in the capital. It was one of the most sacred places in the hearts of countless practitioners. It was extremely difficult for practitioners to take root here, let alone ordinary people. Rumble in the sky. The purple air was steaming and the morning light was spreading. Spiritual shuttles passed by, making a rumbling sound, which was very spectacular. In the Forbidden City, except for spiritual shuttles, it was forbidden for any practitioner or bird to fly in the sky. Therefore, Lin Sun could see spirit realm practitioners with high status in the outside world almost at any time along the way. They were either walking or riding chariots like him. There were even some strong practitioners of Tao Insight Realm. As for practitioners of Human Gang Realm, Earth Gang Realm, Heaven Gang Realm, and so on, they could be seen everywhere. Of course, the practitioners within the 9th level of the Martial Realm were the most common. There were so many of them that it was quite a spectacular sight. In addition to practitioners, Lin Sun also saw many foreigners in strange clothes. For example, monks of Baoshan country, warriors of Yunlan country, and so on. There were even strong voodoo barbarians from the Empire of the Dark. This made Lin Sun's pupils shrink, but he soon understood from the conversation of nearby practitioners that those voodoo barbarians were foreign envoys. They lived in the Forbidden City all year round and were not in danger. Witnessing all these bizarre and spectacular things, Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This was the Forbidden City. It was the heart of Xiao Empire, where there were many clans and forces. It was the center of the empire's power. When it came to prosperity and heritage, there was no one in the world who could match it. Chapter 333. After wandering for an hour, Lin Sun soon learned the address of the Vulture House after a little inquiry. Then he spent a piece of gold coin to hire a chariot and drove to the Vulture House. A piece of gold coin was enough to hire 7 or 8 chariots in other cities. It could be seen from this that the price of goods in the Forbidden City was very high. Without enough wealth, it was really difficult to establish a foothold here. In the northwest area of the Forbidden City, this was the civilian area at the root of the Imperial City. Almost all the people living here were practitioners from all over the world. In terms of prosperity, it couldn't be compared with other areas of the Forbidden City. But even so, this area was very lively, with restaurants, inns, businesses, brothels, everything that one could expect. The Vulture House was one of the restaurants in this area. Its location was very remote. Lin Sun got off the chariot and searched in this area for a long time before he found it in the corner of a street. It was a 2-story building that looked ordinary and inconspicuous. It was almost noon, and there were only a dozen or so guests in the Vulture House. The business seemed to be a little quiet. Is the friend mentioned by Drillmaster Shu Sanchi the owner of this restaurant? Lin Sun raised his head and looked at the sign of the restaurant written with 3 ancient characters, Vulture House, with a touch of surprise in his eyes. He had thought that since the owner of the Vulture House was Shu Sanchi's friend, he must also be an incredible expert. Who would have thought that this so-called Vulture House was just an ordinary restaurant in the Commoner's District? However, Lin Sun didn't despise it at all. As the saying went, great hermits hid in the city. There were many powerful people in the world who were hiding in such an inconspicuous downtown. But when Lin Sun was about to step into the Vulture House, there was a sudden burst of thunderous hoofbeats in the distant street. The earth shook as if thousands of troops were approaching. As soon as the hoofbeats sounded, Lin Sun saw a group of practitioners riding fierce beasts roaring towards him. Crack, crack, crack. On the mounts, those practitioners waved their long whips, cursed, and whipped the pedestrians who stood in the way. They were extremely arrogant. Get out of the way. Damn it, you blind bastards. Get out of here. If you don't want to die, get out of here. The pedestrians on the street screamed and dodged. It was a mess. A few people didn't have time to dodge and were sent flying by the ferocious beasts ridden by the practitioners. They screamed and fell to the ground. There were also some pedestrians who had clearly dodged, but those practitioners still brandished their long whips and lashed them, causing those people's skin to split open and flesh to lacerate, causing them to roll on the ground and cry in pain. Arrogant, disregarding life. This was Lin's first impression of this group of practitioners. Letting a beast run wildly in a busy city was no different from trampling on lives. What made people's hair stand on end was that after doing such a wicked thing, those practitioners were incomparably complacent and kept laughing loudly. Suddenly, Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. Not far away from him, there was a little boy who seemed to be scared out of his wits. He stood there and cried, forgetting to dodge. "Pa!" The ferocious beast at the very front had already galloped over. The practitioner on it revealed a sinister smile as he swung his whip towards the little boy's head. If this attack landed, the little boy's head would definitely be crushed to death. There was a burst of exclamation in the street. Many people couldn't help but close their eyes and didn't dare to watch it any longer. They all knew that the poor and innocent little boy was going to die. At this critical moment, Lin Sun rushed out like lightning, reached out his hands to hold the little boy, and rushed to the roadside dangerously. However, the whip fell on Lin Sun's back, tearing the clothes on his back and leaving a bloody whip mark on his skin, making him feel a burning pain. The only fortunate thing was that the little boy was unscathed. He was just frightened and cried loudly. "What?" Suddenly, the leading practitioner glanced at Lin Sun with some surprise. Then he smiled disdainfully and withdrew his gaze, as if he didn't want to pay attention to Lin Sun. Rumble. At this time, the group of practitioners riding ferocious beasts all rushed over and stopped in front of Vulture House in an orderly manner. Behind this group of practitioners, there was a bronze chariot drawn by 4 black-scaled horses. Although there was no decoration on it, it revealed a ferocious and frightening momentum. Just by looking at the 4 ferocious black-scaled horses and the guards in front, Lin Sun knew that the identity of the owner of the chariot must be extraordinary. Lin Sun frowned. He first returned the child in his arms to his parents. Ignoring the bloody whip mark on his back, he raised his eyes and looked at the black chariot. In next to no time, a young man that wore a scarlet-red cloak and pitch-black armor walked down from the treasured carriage. He had a cold expression while his entire body was filled with a violent and iron-blooded aura that shook the hearts of all. The young man stepped out of the chariot and strode straight into Vulture House. Behind him, a group of guards followed him. "It's Chi Zhe again." On the street, someone said angrily, "In the past half a year, he has brought people to Vulture House every 3 or 5 days and made a mess. It's so abominable. Hey, this guy's surname is not Chi because his sister married in a Chi family. He was lucky enough to be given the surname Chi otherwise. How could he be so powerful today?" Someone said disdainfully, "You're wrong. Although Chi Zhe was born in a poor family, his talent was very good. He joined the army when he was young. He fought on the battlefield for many years and made many military achievements. If not, it was impossible for him to have the surname of Chi family only because of his sister's relationship. Anyway, this guy is too arrogant. Does he really think that he can do whatever he wants in the Forbidden City after changing his surname to Chi? Sooner or later, this kind of despicable person will be cleaned up by someone. Hey, although I also hope to see this scene, it's obvious that Chi Zhe can do whatever he wants in the Forbidden City only with the surname Chi." There was a lot of discussion in the street. The voices of hate, curse, envy, and emotion sounded one after another. Chi Zhe. Lin Sun suddenly thought of Chi Tsangmei and Chi Tsangfeng. He also remembered the heavy encirclement and suppression operations he encountered on the way to the Forbidden City. Although the whip mark on his back didn't hurt his muscles and bones, it was so painful that Lin Sun couldn't help flashing a trace of coldness in his black eyes. He had killed many practitioners of Chi family along the way, but now he was whipped by a servant of a guy who changed his surname to Chi. How could Lin Sun not be angry? "Friend, why does Chi Zhe often come to Vulture House?" Lin Sun asked the pedestrian next to him in a low voice. "Hey, isn't it for the beauty in Vulture House?" The man sneered. "Chi Zhe is so shameless. It's obvious that the beauty has no interest in him, but he comes to pester her again and again. He has no character at all. He is really a bastard." Even if he changed his surname to Chi, he can't change his bad nature. Beauty? Lin Sun was stunned. Bro, this is your first time here, right? Then you have no idea. About a year ago, the manager of the Vulture House, the old cripple, recruited a woman from God knows where. She is extremely beautiful and has a cold temperament, like an unapproachable iceberg. She immediately caused a sensation in the nearby streets and attracted many customers. That's right. That's right. The man showed a covetous and intoxicated look. I've seen the beauty once. Her figure and face are so beautiful. If I can sleep with her for one night, Lin Sun frowned and interrupted, but I don't think the business of Vulture House is good. Why? The man squinted at Lin Sun with slight dissatisfaction and said, That's nonsense. In the past 6 months, Chize often came with his ferocious men. Who dares to patronize the business of Vulture House? After that, he rolled his eyes and left. Lin Sun stood there alone and fell into thought. If he guessed right, the beauty, who had been pestered by Chize for more than half a year, should be Drill Master Young Ko. She was delicate and beautiful with a cold temperament. Wasn't that her? More than a year ago, it was the time when Drill Master Young Ko left the bloodthirsty camp. The time was also consistent. How dare Chize covet the beauty of Drill Master Young Ko? Isn't he afraid of being beaten to death? Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help shaking his head. No, if it was really Drill Master Young Ko, how could she be pestered by Chize for half a year without killing him? Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, there was a loud noise in the opposite Vulture House. Immediately, more than a dozen diners were thrown out with screams. Get out of here. Don't you see my master is working? If I see you in Vulture House again, I'll kill you without mercy. One of Chize's attendants came out and scolded the diners who fell to the ground with disdain. Lin Sun frowned, stepped forward to help a diner up and asked, What happened inside? The man screamed. Chize was rejected by the iceberg beauty again. He was crazy all of a sudden. We were also affected. Lin Sun's heart tightened. He didn't dare to hesitate and rushed to Vulture House. He was not worried that young Ku would be bullied. He was worried that young Ku would be hated by Chi family if she bullied Chize. Now Lin Sun knew clearly about the contradiction between the aristocratic families and the poor families at the bottom. Once such a thing happened, even if Chize was unreasonable, he would inevitably harm young Ku in order to maintain the dignity of Chi family. Vulture House is closed today. Get out of here. In front of the door, 2 guards stood there. When they saw Lin Sun, they immediately scolded him. Coincidentally, one of the practitioners was the one who whipped Lin Sun just now. When he saw Lin Sun's face clearly, he immediately smiled grimly and said, It's you, boy. Haven't you been whipped enough? As he said, he raised the iron whip in his hand and was about to hit Lin Sun's head. Crack! But Lin Sun didn't retreat. Instead, he slapped the guy in the face. He screamed. His mouth and nose were bleeding, and his teeth were peeled off. His body turned around like a top. Finally, he knelt on the ground with stars in his eyes and almost fainted. Chapter 334. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun had grabbed the iron whip. Crack! The whip was unceremoniously lashed down. The strong wind contained the internal strength. The practitioner's skin and flesh were broken, and his internal organs were seriously injured. Finally, he convulsed and fainted. You're courting death. The practitioner on the other side was furious. As soon as he raised his hand, he felt a horrible storm-like momentum suddenly burst out from Lin Sun. With a bang, the practitioner was shaken by Lin Sun's momentum and flew backward. He had no time to resist or respond. Crack! Lin Sun didn't show any mercy. He lashed out with the iron whip again, which made the practitioner cough blood and faint as if he was electrocuted. Throwing away the iron whip, Lin Sun rushed into the first floor of Vulture House. But he glanced around and found no one. When he climbed to the second floor, he found no one. Lin Sun was stunned, and then he noticed that there was a door leading to a courtyard in the depths of the Vulture House. Overlooking from the second floor, he could have a panoramic view of the whole courtyard. At this time, a group of practitioners stood in the huge courtyard. Chize stood in front of them with a saber on his neck. He then looked at the owner of the saber. She was dressed in plain clothes, and her figure was slender and graceful. She had a pair of straight legs that made her look even taller. She had a head of fine black short hair, and her facial features were beautiful and fair. She was a beautiful woman with impeccable looks, figure, and temperament. Her movements of holding the saber were steady and precise. Her eyebrows were full of calmness and indifference. She was like a lonely iceberg with an inviolable temperament. This person was Drill Master Young Ke. Compared with the time in bloodthirsty camp, Young Ke, who took off the military uniform of the Imperial Army, added an indescribable beauty. Her unique calm and cold temperament, coupled with her delicate and beautiful facial features, gave people a strong visual impact. Even Lin Sun couldn't help being slightly stunned when he saw her for the first time. Then he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Young Ke just held the saber and didn't kill him. Unexpectedly, Chi Zhe, whose saber was on his neck, was not nervous at all. He was calm and steady. He stared at Young Ke's beautiful face and said with a smile, "I know you've done it, so put away your sword." Young Ke didn't put away her knife. "Do you really think I won't dare to kill you?" Chi Zhe burst into laughter with a touch of arrogance on his face. "Of course you dare not. If you kill me, you may escape from here, but the Vulture House and the owner of the Vulture House will definitely pay a bloody price for it." After pausing for a moment, his gaze became scorching and firm as he said, "Young Ke, you're actually very clear that it's very easy to kill me, but the consequences aren't simple at all. That's why you've never dared to make a move. Look, this is the power of influence." As he finished speaking, he couldn't help but raise his hand with the intention of stroking Young Ke's face. However, when he saw Young Ke's calm and emotionless eyes, he withdrew his hand in the end. Chi Zhe smiled as if he was sure about Young Ke. "No matter what, you must go with me today. Otherwise, I will smash the Vulture House and kill the owner of the Vulture House." Young Ke narrowed her eyes and said in a cold voice, "How dare you?" Chi Zhe said with a smile, "You can have a try. I guess you don't want to see the owner of the Vulture House die, because of you anyway. In this case, what else can you do to struggle?" Young Ke fell into silence. Chi Zhe became more and more complacent. Like a hunter who was good at playing with women's mind, he said slowly, "Young Ke, I really like you. What's wrong with you following me? Now, I have the backing of the Qi family, one of the 7 top aristocratic families. If you follow me, you will also become a member of the Qi family. How glorious and glorious it is." Bang! Young Ke shook her wrist and hit Chi Zhe's chest with the back of the saber. Chi Zhe immediately fell out. "Get out!" Young Ke spat out a word gently. Chi Zhe didn't get angry at all. He got up slowly, dusted his clothes, and walked to Young Ke step by step, saying, "Don't make trouble. You dare not kill me. Why struggle?" Seeing this, a group of practitioners and attendants nearby all showed a playful face. In their eyes, Young Ke was as unattainable as an iceberg. She could strongly stimulate men's desire to conquer. Now, seeing Chi Zhe constantly attacking Young Ke's psychological defense line like an experienced hunter, they felt very satisfied just watching. Young Ke looked at Chi Zhe, who was approaching step by step. Her palms and fingers turned white because of the force of holding the saber. Her clear eyes were as calm as water, full of struggle. When he was only 1 foot away from Young Ke, Chi Zhe smiled. It was a confident smile. No matter how high this woman's cultivation was, how strong her fighting capacity was, and how cold and aloof her temperament was, she still had to submit to him obediently. This kind of pleasure of conquest stimulated Chi Zhe's blood to boil. He couldn't wait to laugh up to the sky. This was power. In front of power, everything was vulnerable to a paper tiger. "Young Ke, come with me," Chi Zhe said softly. He raised his hand and slowly grabbed Young Ke's arm. Young Ke's body trembled imperceptibly. She seemed to be trying to endure the emotions in her heart. This made Chi Zhe more and more complacent. This was the pleasure of conquest. It was an unparalleled enjoyment. Only this woman in front of him could give him such a strong feeling. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. "If you dare to touch her, I promise to cut off your claws and feed them to the dogs." With the voice, Lin Sun's figure had swept into the courtyard. Who? You're courting death. Reckless fool. How dare you ruin my master's plans? Suddenly, a group of practitioners became restless. They shouted and rushed to Lin Sun. At this moment, when young Ku saw Lin Sun, she couldn't help being stunned. Why did this little guy come here? Go to hell. In the twinkling of an eye, a group of practitioners' attendants had already rushed to Lin Sun. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. He took out 2 meteor's crossbows. After 2 ear-piercing explosions, silver spiritual arrows burst out like a rainstorm, blooming in the crowd like fireworks. Puff, puff, puff. In an instant, 7 or 8 practitioners were killed on the spot. Their blood was like a waterfall. Before the end, flowing lightsaber had been unsheathed. Lin Sun held it in his hand and strode forward. Witnessing all this just now, Lin Sun's lungs were about to explode, especially when he saw drill master young Ku, who couldn't be desecrated in his heart, was helpless because of Chi Zhe. Lin Sun was full of hatred and sadness. Young Ku was a drill master in the bloodthirsty camp of the Empire, but in the face of a guy with the surname of Chi family, she was in a dilemma. How absurd was this? How ridiculous was this? But Lin Sun knew that this was the reality. The reason why Young Ku didn't dare to act rashly was that Chi family was behind Chi Zhe. The power of aristocratic families was the cause of all this. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun couldn't bear it anymore. He vented the endless hatred in his heart at once and started to fight mercilessly. For a while, the saber light was shooting in the courtyard, crisscrossing like a storm. Most of the practitioners' attendants were in human gang realm, so they couldn't bear such a blow. In the blink of an eye, more than half of them had been killed or injured. You're courting death. At this moment, Chi Zhe's face darkened. He was completely irritated. His eyes became gloomy and terrible. He was about to succeed, but was suddenly disturbed by others, which made him furious. Boom! He flew up and grabbed fiercely with his palm from afar. An expanse of dazzling and jet-black palm winds flashed out like a black wave that pressed down on the sky and roared, killing the enemy in the air. This was the means of sea spirit realm. But as soon as Chi Zhe made a move, Young Ku seemed to have made a decision. She gritted her teeth and jumped up. With a swish, Young Ku patted gently with her palm and fingers. The void seemed to collapse, and the power of Chi Zhe's palm was instantly shattered. Young Ku, Chi Zhe was furious. He couldn't believe that Young Ku dared to stop him. Bang! But before he finished his words, Young Ku kicked out with a beautiful and neat whip leg. The horrible leg force turned into a shadow and hit Chi Zhe's chest across the air. With a cracking sound, Chi Zhe's chest collapsed and his 7 orifices bled. His whole body was smashed to the ground, making a big pit with smoke and dust splashing. Almost at the same time, Lin Sun had killed the attendants of Chi Zhe. He came over with a bloody saber and said with a smile, "Drill Master Young Ku, this is your style." Young Ku squinted at Lin Sun calmly and said, "You have caused me a big trouble as soon as we met. Think about how to solve it first." "Solve it? Impossible. Unless you kill me right now, none of you can escape." Chi Zhe roared on the ground. His hair was disheveled. His facial features were twisted and livid, and his eyes were bloodshot, full of tyranny and anger. Since he changed his surname to Chi, no one dared to provoke him wherever he went. He had never suffered such a big loss. Young Ku frowned and was about to say something, but Lin Sun said, "Drill Master, let me deal with it. I'll make sure that you don't have to worry about it." As he said, he walked to Chi Zhe with his saber and showed a warm smile. "Don't worry, I won't kill you." Having said that, he raised his saber and cut off Chi Zhe's palms. In an instant, blood burst out like a fountain. Chi Zhe screamed wildly in pain. "You're finished. You're finished. Chi family will never let you go. I swear." Hearing this, Young Ku frowned more and more. She was a little worried. Lin Sun squatted down, stared at Chi Zhe's twisted, crazy and livid cheeks, and said with a smile, "You probably don't know that on my way to the Forbidden City, I almost killed more than 2,000 practitioners sent by Chi family and destroyed 6 Ying battleships of Qi family. By the way, even Qi Songfeng ran to Wutu City to kill me, but I'm still alive. After a pause, Lin Sun asked seriously, "Now, do you think I will still be afraid of the revenge of Qi family?" Chapter 335. Qi Zhe was severely injured by young Ke before, and his thoracic bones were broken. Then his hands were cut off by Lin Sun. The heavy blow made him scream in pain and was about to collapse. He cursed crazily in his heart. He hated Lin Sun and young Ke to the extreme. He vowed that if he could survive this time, he would torture them to death. However, when he heard Lin Sun's words, Qi Zhe was like being struck by lightning. The resentment and madness in his heart were replaced by endless panic. Killed more than 2,000 practitioners sent by Qi family? Destroyed 6 Ziying battleships? How the hell was this possible? Qi Zhe didn't believe it at first, but when he heard that even Qi Songfeng couldn't kill Lin Sun, he immediately panicked. Because he also heard that just yesterday, Qi Songfeng went out without authorization. When he wanted to deal with an outsider, he destroyed the arrangement of the clan and was finally put in confinement by the big shots of Qi family. If what Lin Sun said was true, wasn't it the young man in front of him who Qi Songfeng wanted to deal with yesterday? Thinking of this, Qi Zhe completely collapsed. His face was bleak and his eyes were empty. He even seemed to forget the injury on his body. No wonder this guy dared to fight unscrupulously. It turned out that he was also a tough guy with a great background. When Young Ko heard what Lin Sun said, she couldn't help but be stunned. How could this guy do so many things before he came to the Forbidden City? Why did Qi family send forces to deal with him? Why did they watch him enter the Forbidden City at the last moment and didn't retaliate? Young Ko realized that there must be a reason for this. But Lin Sun didn't seem to notice the change of Qi Zhe's expression. He still said with a smile, "Of course, you cannot believe it, but it doesn't matter. You just need to know that it's really a simple thing for me to kill you." Qi Zhe looked dull and empty. He was out of his wits. He was disheartened and completely admitted defeat. "Of course, since I said so much, I naturally didn't intend to kill you at this time." But Chen Shi's next words surprised young Ke. Even Qi Zhe couldn't help but tremble. A look of life flashed in his hollow pupils. But he still didn't believe it. He thought that Lin Sun was deliberately torturing him. He said hoarsely, "Don't play tricks. If you want to kill me, just kill me. If I frown, I will change my surname to yours." Lin Sun smiled slightly. In Qi Zhe's astonished eyes, he began to deal with Qi Zhe's broken hand quickly. First, he helped to stop the bleeding and clean it. Then, he took out the ointment needed for healing and applied it on the wound. Finally, he wrapped the wound with a piece of cloth. Qi Zhe was completely stunned and couldn't speak. "Don't be touched. I'm just trying to save your life," Lin Sun said with a smile, "because I'm really curious about how they will feel when you return a Qi family alive after losing your hands and becoming a cripple. I heard that your surname is given by Qi family. This is a little difficult to handle. If they take back the surname they bestowed upon you and no longer recognize you as a clansman." Before he finished his words, Qi Zhe's head was about to explode as if he was hit hard by a stick. He finally understood. Lin Sun didn't kill him out of kindness. It was obvious that Lin Sun wanted to make him fall into a miserable situation. Think about it. A useless person was worthless, even if the Qi family didn't take away his surname. How could he survive in the future? After losing his strength, he was bound to be reduced to a complete clown, struggling at death's door and being trampled underfoot by countless people. The more he thought about it, the more frightened Qi Zhe was. Who was the young man in front of him? How could he be so vicious? He was a devil. No, even a devil was not as vicious as him. Hearing this, young Ke couldn't help saying, "Lin Sun, if you offend Qi family, don't worry. If Qi family wants revenge, they can come to me." Lin Sun smiled warmly. He seemed to think of something and reminded Qi Zhe, "Well, I forgot to tell you that if you want to retaliate against me in the future, you can come to Heart Cleansing Peak, one of the 72 peaks of the Mountain of Aristocrats. It's easy to find me." The Mountain of Aristocrats. Heart Cleansing Peak. Qi Zhe's eyes were gloomy. He was so shocked that he wanted to die. It turned out that this guy was also a disciple of an aristocratic family. No, Chise suddenly remembered that Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak had declined more than 10 years ago. Now it could barely be regarded as an inferior aristocratic family. Why did he dare to challenge Chi family? Bah, after saying so much, it turns out that you're just a swindler who uses his connections to intimidate others. Chise sneered. Lin Sun got up and said with a smile, "It's no fun to deceive people like you. Go ahead. You are welcome to take Chi family's people to Heart-Cleansing Peak for revenge." Seeing Lin Sun was so confident, Chise's face changed for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth, got up despite his injuries, and staggered out. Before leaving, he didn't forget to look at Lin Sun and Young Ku with resentment. Obviously, this guy still has a glimmer of hope in his heart. He thinks that Chi family will avenge him. Yes, people should find some hope for themselves as long as they are alive. Otherwise, they're no different from being dead. Lin Sun sighed with a smile. Young Ke frowned and glanced at Lin Sun, saying, "Do you still have the mood to sigh for others?" Lin Sun sighed, "I don't itch when I have too many lice, and I don't worry when I have too many debts. Anyway, he dares to harm you, Drill Master Young Ku, so I dare to make him suffer and pay an unbearable price." Young Ke's clear eyes slightly narrowed. Looking at the handsome young man in front of her who she hadn't seen for a long time, she couldn't help but have a strange feeling in her heart. Although this boy had changed a lot, he was still good. "I forgot one thing. I should let Chise clean up here before leaving." Lin Sun glanced at the courtyard. The ground was in a mess. Corpses were everywhere, and the smell of blood was pungent. "No need to clean up. Do you think it's necessary to stay here after killing so many people of Chi family?" Young Ke was helpless. She turned and walked out. "I'm going to call Vulture. You will leave with us later." "Leave? Where?" Lin Sun was stunned. "How can there be a place for me in the Forbidden City after making such a big storm? I will run away as far as I can," Young Ke said casually. Lin Sun understood in an instant. In the final analysis, Young Ke was still worried about the revenge from Chi family. How valiant Drill Master Young Ke was when she was in the bloodthirsty camp. But in the Forbidden City, she was pestered by a guy who had changed his surname to Chi. She was tied up. Up to now, she had no choice but to leave the Forbidden City after killing a group of rubbish. This made Lin Sun quite upset in his heart. He finally understood what the so-called aristocratic families meant to ordinary people. Even Young Ke could only swallow her anger, let alone others. If it weren't for the power of Chi family, how could Chise, whose strength was far inferior to Young Ke, be so unscrupulous and lawless? "Drill Master, I have a way to keep us all in the Forbidden City," Lin Sun said seriously. He had seen that Young Ke was extremely reluctant to leave. Otherwise, she couldn't bear the harassment of Chise for half a year. Sure enough, Young Ke suddenly stopped and looked at Lin Sun. "What's the way? Come back to Heart-Cleansing Peak with me." Lin Sun took a deep breath and didn't hide anything. He told her his life experience and the current situation he was facing. "It turns out that you are really the heir of Lin family?" Young Ke couldn't help being stunned after knowing all this. She had also heard of Lin family, but it was too strange for her to imagine that Lin Sun would be related to such an aristocratic family. Lin Sun smiled. "I didn't know it until yesterday. In fact, there was a touch of unspeakable, complex emotions in this sentence. Those who weren't involved couldn't understand the bitterness in it." "So you're saying that you came to find me this time to ask for my help?" Young Ke looked at Lin Sun directly. Lin Sun said with a little helplessness, "I can't help it. I just came here and I'm alone. It's impossible for me to fight against those greedy old guys." He took a deep breath and said resolutely, "So, I can only accumulate strength as soon as possible and use any available resources by any means. Otherwise, it's hard to keep my life, let alone keep Heart-Cleansing Peak." Young Ke was silent for a moment. She looked at Lin Sun indifferently and said, "If I offend Chi family, I can escape. But if I jump in your fire pit, I may be completely trapped." Lin Sun smiled bitterly. "That's true. Suddenly, he was a little discouraged and realized a problem. Was it really selfish to ask Drill Master Young to go back to heart-cleansing peak with him? It should be known that once Drill Master Young stood in the same camp with him, the danger she would face was hundreds of times more dangerous than killing Cheese. Come with me first. Young didn't refuse directly. Instead, she took Lin Sun out of Vulture House and walked along the streets for 10 minutes. Finally, she pushed the door into a remote courtyard. The courtyard was quiet and secluded. There was a dense, ancient tree in the center. Under the ancient tree, a middle-aged man was sitting in a wheelchair, holding a fat, snow-white leopard cat in his arms. The middle-aged man had long gray hair. His face was pale and almost transparent. He seemed to have a stubborn disease, which made him feel extremely weak. But his expression was extremely serene. Under his broad eyebrows, there was a pair of calm eyes, which seemed to be able to see through the vicissitudes of the world. If he hadn't been sitting in a wheelchair with a pale and sickly face, Lin Sun would have suspected that he was a great master who lived in seclusion. Young Ku, here you are. Seeing Young Ku pushing the door in, the middle-aged man showed a gentle smile. His voice was as low as morning bell and evening drum, which had a unique charm. But when he saw Lin Sun, the middle-aged man was slightly stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said, "This young man is full of killing intent. His clothes are stained with blood. Did he kill someone just now?" Immediately, he realized something. His clear eyes moved to Young Ku and said with a little emotion, "If I'm right, you have completely fallen out with Cheese, haven't you?" Lin Sun was shocked. The middle-aged man had a keen insight. With just a single glance, he was able to determine so many things. If he didn't possess abundant experience and wisdom, it would be impossible for him to accomplish this. Chapter 336. Young Ku nodded and didn't deny it. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Is it because of this young man? You don't have to deny it. In my opinion, even without this young man, this kind of thing will happen sooner or later according to your temperament." Lin Sun was completely shocked this time. He finally understood what was called great wisdom. The middle-aged man had guessed what had happened just now in a few words. It was amazing. Young could change the topic. "Vulture, this is Lin Sun, one of the trainees who successfully graduated from the Bloodthirsty camp the year before last." Vulture. It turned out that he was the boss of Vulture House. Lin Sun immediately stepped forward and said, "Nice to meet you, senior." Vulture smiled slightly. "Don't be so polite. You can find this place because Shu Sanchi has given you guidance. In this case, you're not an outsider." Lin Sun immediately sighed with emotion. "Senior, you have a keen eye and can predict things like a god. I have to admire you." Vulture smiled and said, "Give me the hairpin." Lin Sun was stunned and immediately came to his senses. He took out the silver hairpin given to him by Shu Sanchi and handed it to Vulture. Vulture gently stroked the hairpin with a touch of softness in his eyes. After a while, he said, "You must have something to ask of me if you come here with this hairpin. Tell me, how can I help you?" Before Lin Sun opened his mouth, Young Ku stepped forward and whispered Lin's situation to Vulture. After hearing it, Vulture showed a solemn expression and said, "I didn't expect that you are the descendant of Lord Daochun. I'm sorry. Lord Daochun must be Lin Daochun, Lin Sun's great-grandfather." To Lin Sun's surprise, Vulture seemed to admire his great-grandfather so much that he even gave great respect to Lin Sun, a junior. "To tell you the truth, I didn't know my origin until yesterday, so I know nothing about my great-grandfather. I'm sorry to make you laugh." Lin Sun said shamefully, "Well, no more small talk. I already know your story, but I'm not sure whether it's necessary to help you at present." Vulture's eyes were calm with a kind of power to pry into people's hearts. "After all, you also know that if I help you, I will face many terrible dangers. I need you to prove that you can bear this responsibility." "How?" asked Lin Sun. "You are only in the Earthgang realm. If I test your strength, it will be difficult for you. Tell me, if you are in charge of Heart Cleansing Peak, what will you do?" Vulture's tone was gentle, and his eyes were clear. Being stared at by him, Lin Sun felt an inexplicable pressure. Young didn't say anything more at this moment. She just looked at Lin with her clear eyes. She also saw that this was a test. If Lin could pass it, he would get help from Vulture. If he couldn't pass, he could only leave alone. Let's settle our internal problems first. Lin Sun answered without hesitation. He had thought about this question countless times last night. How do we solve the internal problems? Spirit Vulture continued to ask. His eyes became even calmer, and there was an indescribable dignity that pressed down on one's mind. Lin Sun said in a low voice, "Let's stabilize our foundation first, accumulate strength, and strike later." Vulture shook his head, seemingly dissatisfied, and said, "Too general. It can be seen that you don't have specific plans and arrangements at the moment." Lin Sun was stunned and said, "In my opinion, it's far from the specific layout at present." "Oh," Vulture said with interest, "tell me about it." Lin Sun said quickly, "My only advantage at present is my identity as the lineal heir of Lin family. I can take over heart-cleansing Peak justifiably. On this point, other clansmen of Lin family have lost to me innately." Vulture nodded, "Justifiably. This is the key point." Lin Sun smiled and continued, "However, my situation is not very optimistic. I have neither money nor manpower. I'm alone, not famous, not strong enough, and my personal prestige is far from convincing." There was a touch of appreciation in Vulture's eyes. From these words, he had already judged that Lin Sun was not a braggart. It was easy to know the enemy, but it was often difficult to know oneself. The most difficult thing for a practitioner to understand was himself. It was extremely rare for Lin Sun to examine and analyze himself and make sober and calm judgments at his age. "So I plan to change myself first before solving the internal problems. When I have the ability, I will plan the overall situation and make a clear plan." Lin Sun took a deep breath and spoke out his real thoughts. Hearing this, Young Ku had been persuaded. He had seen that Lin Sun didn't come to ask for help because of fear. On the contrary, he had his own ideas and plans. "I haven't seen him for a year or two, but he has changed so much. If Chief Shu knows it, he will be very pleased." Young Ku was thoughtful. She knew very well that although Shu Sanchi didn't take much care of Lin Sun in the bloodthirsty camp, Lin Sun was undoubtedly one of the trainees Shu Sanchi appreciated most. Otherwise, Shu Sanchi would not give the silver hairpin to Lin Sun. But to Young Ku's surprise, after hearing Lin Sun's answer, Vulture still didn't seem to be moved. He continued to ask, "Your idea is good. I'm just curious about how you will change yourself. It's not something that can be done in a day and a night." Lin Sun suddenly smiled with a rare look of disdain on his angular and delicate face. He said calmly, "It may be difficult for others to make a change, but I'm different from them. As long as I want to do it, I can definitely let everyone in the Forbidden City know my name within a month." Young Ku's clear eyes were fixed, and a strange look flashed through her eyes. She rarely saw Lin Sun being so confident. People like him would never say such decisive and complacent words easily. It seemed that he must have a lot of trump cards that he hadn't exposed. Almost at the same time, Vulture also smiled and applauded. "Now I can be sure that it doesn't seem to be a bad thing to help you." Lin Sun felt refreshed and said happily, "So you have agreed to help me?" Young Ku said angrily, "As long as you are not stupid, you can already judge it, right? You are so smart. Why are you confused at this time?" Lin Sun was speechless. Of course, he could judge it, but he was too excited in his heart, which made it difficult for him to digest the joy. Originally, he planned to ask Young Ku for help. Who would have thought that he got the help of Vulture by accident? How could Lin Sun not be overjoyed? Vulture seemed to be sick and had no momentum, but he could become Shu Sanchi's friend and was respected by Young Ku. Naturally, he couldn't be an ordinary person. If he and Young Ku could help him, he would undoubtedly have more chips to take charge of Heart Cleansing Peak. Now, let me introduce myself again. My code name is Vulture. Like Shu Sanchi, I was one of the trainees of Bloodthirsty Camp. At this time, Vulture looked solemn and said, "Originally, I had the cultivation of Tao Insight Realm, but because of a disaster that year, I was plagued by disease. Now I was no different from a disabled person, plagued by disease. What kind of disease could actually torture a practitioner in the Tao insight realm into a cripple? Lin Sun was shocked. When he was about to ask, Vulture waved his hand and said, "Don't ask more about it. I just want to tell you that I can't help you in the battle. The only thing I can do is to help you judge the situation and plan the layout. In short, I could do all the chores for you." Hearing this, Lin Sun was stunned. Young Ku glared at him and reminded him, "Vulture is a tactical master that even Chief Shu has to humbly ask for advice. Even the dean of Green Deer School came to invite him to work in Green Deer School in person, but he refused. You're still standing there stupidly. How stupid you are." Lin Sun clicked his tongue and quickly bowed to thank her. He was extremely happy. He had expected that Vulture must be extraordinary, but he didn't expect that he was so powerful that Instructor Shu Sanchi had to humbly ask for advice. Even the dean of Green Deer School invited him to work in Green Deer School. That was so awesome. Without any delay, Lin Sun left with young Ku and Vulture at noon and returned to Heart-Cleansing Peak in the chariot. On the way, Lin Sun learned that the reason why young Ku stayed in the Forbidden City was to take care of Vulture. According to young Ku, it was because Vulture had saved her life in those years. But when Lin Sun asked about Vulture's disease, young Ku avoided talking about it. She only said that Lin Sun would understand it when he had a chance in the future. This made Lin Sun conclude that Vulture's disease must be extremely difficult to deal with. It was even very likely to be a terminal disease. Otherwise, with his ability, he would have been cured long ago. After returning to Heart-Cleansing Peak, Lin Sun told Lin Zhong to arrange a place for young Ku and Vulture to live. He also told Lin Zhong that young Ku and Vulture were the most trustworthy people on Heart-Cleansing Peak in addition to him. To Lin Sun's surprise, when Vulture saw Lin Zhong, he seemed to recognize Lin Zhong and said, "May I ask if you're the one who won the 3rd place in the nation test 60 years ago and was known as Bronze Charming? Shen Jingluan?" Lin Zhong was obviously stiff and his expression changed. After a while, he shook his head and said, "Shen Jingluan is dead. There's only one old slave in the world." Vulture narrowed his eyes and didn't ask more. But these words made Lin Sun's heart fluctuate. He didn't expect that the ordinary old man with a stooped body in front of him seemed to have another identity. Bronze Charming. How could ordinary people have such a good reputation? Lin Sun secretly made up his mind that he must figure out this matter when he had a chance. After arranging the residence, Lin Sun invited young Ku and Vulture into his study and began to plan. However, Vulture directly told him that everything was up to Lin Sun. He was only responsible for dealing with all chores. When Lin Sun made a decision, he would put forward corresponding arrangements and wouldn't criticize Lin Sun's decision. And young Ku also said frankly that she was only responsible for doing things. If there was anything, Lin Sun could directly order her to carry it out. Their attitude was so clear that Lin Sun was stunned. He immediately understood that they were not unwilling to help him with all their strength, but silently reminded him that he was the master of everything on Heart-Cleansing Peak. If he wanted to be the real successor of Lin family, he must have his own independent ability and not rely too much on others. Otherwise, what was the difference between him and a puppet that could only be manipulated by others? From this moment on, Lin Sun finally realized that his identity had become different from the past.